Sabah al-khair. Assalamu alaikum. Can I ask you please to be seated so that we can start? Apologies for the late start. It's just with the traffic and everybody's coming from holidays and going back to schools and that kind of thing. So we had to make sure that we accommodate everyone, to make sure that we have them, most of you available today with us. What a great day. Just literally after a very long period of holidays and backward and forward to the country. And I have to say that this is the first event that is taking place right now after all these holidays. But what a great start talking about value engineering and talking about how we can make the best out of what we do, which is fantastic and brilliant. I'll walk you through a very quick, presentation. But before we do that, I really would like to thank CPI for the great achievements that they have been doing all over the years and for the great involvement that they have in the engineering construction market. Their support to all of us individually and to our companies has been valued throughout the years. Today, CPI bring an important topic for all of us, whether we are on the development side or on the government side or on the public sector or the private sector, contractors, consultants, you name it. We are all keen to achieve better results as we go along. One of the things that attracts my attention today is really the number of sponsors that we have, and it shows the importance of this topic and how much we are all eager and keen to achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve. So I will start really with thanking the sponsors that we have today, from Autodesk, La Casa, PACE, CCS, CKR, Trimble, Aerolink, Hill International, CIOB, RICS, and last but not least, Sharjah Electricity and Water Authority. So a big applause for all of you guys, and thank you for your support. Quick note on the housekeeping. If you hear the fire alarm today, please do not panic, do not run. It's not a fire drill, but you better leave your seat and actually walk to the assembly point. There are fire instructions, just in case of fire, that are actually based on your tables. So please feel free to go through it very quickly before we start, so you know the drill in case anything happens. One last thing about housekeeping. Can I ask you please to put your phones on silent, just out of respect to the speakers and to the panelists, and make sure that you take your private calls outside the event. Okay. Moving forward, why are we here today? So when we're talking about value engineering, we're talking about what? Is it really a cost reduction? And I think this is the biggest question for most of us. We always wonder, when we're talking about value engineering workshops, when we're talking about value engineering themes and objectives that we have within the companies, or even when we're talking to our clients or our colleagues, what do we actually mean by value engineering? A lot of people used to take it in the past as it's a pure cost reduction. I would love to think about it these days, that it's actually above and beyond that. It's actually improving the value. Everything has a value in everything that we do. But when we improve the value of a product, when we improve the value of a process, when we improve the value of a service, that's really what we call it, value engineering. But why? Why do we need to use value engineering? What's the benefit? Why are we all here today? Why are we keen on value engineering? What difference does it make to us? I've just put in some few bullet points, but to be honest with you, I can keep going and going and put like an endless list of why value engineering is important to us and why are we actually keen to achieve value engineering. When we're talking about shrinking resources, we're talking about doing more with less. We're talking about putting more products on the streets. We're talking about innovative and inspirational ideas. We're talking about improving project schedule, time. We're all keen on the time. That's how when we are improving the process. That's how when we're improving the quality of what we've got. Improving constructability. We come up with innovative, creative ideas, thinking outside the box, thinking about how we can do things in a better way, with a better quality, with less time, with more efficiency, and of course, with less cost. So we're talking about resolving stakeholder issues. When we have value engineering, we have better coordination. We have more people engaged right and left, supporting us and helping us to achieve the outcome that we're looking for. We're talking about reducing the operating cost, rather than doing things over and over and over again, providing efficiency to the whole operation that we actually function with. Reducing the overall project cost. Yes, money is important. Is it the only thing? No. But it is important because it affects everything that we do as well. And last but not least, mitigating risks. When we provide value engineering, we have better planning. And when you have better planning, you have better risk management. You can mitigate your risks, you can plan for it. We're not talking about waiving all your risks, no, but you're talking about reducing them. You're talking about mitigating them. When we're talking about value engineering and project management, we face constraints because we're really talking about quality, but you have a triple constraints that actually affects what you're doing. We've got the scope, which is the objective or the content or really what you're trying to achieve. You've got the time to deliver that scope, and you've got the cost associated with both. When you have those three, your aim for any project to achieve the quality that you're looking for is to create the right balance between the three. And in my opinion, this is what value engineering is all about. It's about creating and improving the value by balancing those three together. And on this note, I would like to address the audience and just share my enthusiasm and excitement about having one of our keynote or key speakers into this event. This man is actually a head of a top regional company called SEWA, Sharjah Electricity and Water Authority, which demonstrates really high performance, effectiveness, vision, leadership, innovation, and creativity. This man has been recognized as the knowledge ambassador for the UAE. And recently, which is just about last month, he actually, his latest publishment is a book called Sustainable Development Goals. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Rashid Alleem.
Thanks, Sami. I thought you were talking about a different person, but then I recognized it was myself you're talking about. So, do I look like an evil with those two horns here? Yeah? Right, lovely morning. I'm pretty much excited to be here. This is the first value engineering conference. There's a definition for engineers. If you go to Google it or go to the dictionary, it says engineers, they are the ones who produce innovative solutions for pressing problems in the world. So this is the basic definition of engineers. So they're solution providers. My definition is different. It says an engineer is the one who cannot fix it, he hides it, right? He goes hide things around. So please don't do that, person. Are you all here excited to be around here this morning? Are you sure? Yeah? So you still have that excitement? Right, I will give you 3 P's now to start up with, right? Write them down. If you get them right, then you can leave the room. But you give yourself commitment to live those 3 P's now, this morning, to get the best out of it. Deal? All right, thanks. First, be very positive of today's program, right? Can you put a tick there? Can you be very positive, right? Then be patient, please, right? You won't have much break. The coming up one will be around 12 noon, so be patient, please, right? The third is persistent, yeah? Keep moving forward. Try to get the best out of this. Please give yourself today a title called the Brilliant Networker. You are here to exchange the knowledge. You are here to share your success stories. You are here to share your inspiration, aspirations, the way how to move for a better tomorrow, right? We engineers, we leaders, during the tough times, we come up with a very innovative terms. and terminologies to fit the purpose, to fit why we're here, and just try to overcome things, right? If you drive in major cities, highways, during the booming cycle, and if there is a real estate building or any commercial buildings coming, it says all sold, sold, sold. So you see sold, sold, sold. But during tough time, they just change one letter from sold to hold, with the S changed to be H. So from sold to hold. So there's no more sold, but it says all on hold now, right? So we're always very good in making the numbers. I remember a time I was a speaker at the South India, in my lovely city called Kochi, is in the Kerala, and I was so deep inside my presentation in the program. I was talking about the financial crisis. That was back in 2009. And I was talking about the graphs, how the world will be so much affected by the Lehman Brothers, collapse and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of stories. And I was so excited to show, my energy there, and we have to do something. The crisis is going to hit everybody's pocket, so what should we do? At the end, there was a Q&A session. A gentleman stood up and I said, Doctor, I've got a question for you here. Are you ready to take it? I said, yes, please, go ahead. But it should be within the subject. Yes, it's pretty much within that. I totally disagree of your statement when you said that Lehman Brothers is going to hit everybody's pocket very hard. I said, how is that? Yes, this is my personal belief. What type of business you're in? He said, sir, I'm running a business. When people during tough time are happy, coming to me. During bad time, I have tripled that number. And I start, puzzling. What the hell he's talking about here? He said, sir, I'm running a bar. I'm selling alcohol. So people during good times, they come to me. During bad times, the number is even double. So be careful. The same thing when this is the beauty of being in conferences. I was in Singapore once, and at the end, the gentleman stood up and I said, sir, can I ask a question? I said, please go ahead. He said, what's the difference between a recession and depression? I said, what is that? I'm not an economist. I'm just a speaker here, but I'm talk about my philosophy of seeing the things and reading the circumstances surrounding us. But let me tell you this. This is what I learned from my life. If your neighbor loses his job, we call this recession. He said, okay, got it. I said, when you and your neighbor loses job, this is a depression. So when both of you. So I'm really excited to be here because this is the first untouched, if you would, a subject called value engineering. But let's not to hide the truth. It's true. This is a human cycle. When we are faced with so much challenges, we come up with innovative ideas and solutions. So most of those innovative ideas came from those school dropout, right? Those who left the schools at the early age, or those who decided to leave the company and create their own business. Today I was listening to the Dubai Eye, one of my loved radio channel here in the city, and they spoke about welcoming Amazon on the Billionaires Club now. Amazon is part of the billionaires now, no more millionaires, they're in billionaires in the big B. And the reason behind that, they've done so much diversification on their thinking process that is not they're selling books anymore, but they start to enter in different areas and bring innovative solutions to the main business, mainstream business they're doing. So they were able, within a short span of time, to enter that big club. That's which is not an easy, but that's when you have energy. If you go back in the 90s when Jeff decided to create Amazon, everything thought he was crazy. He was burning his own fingers and moving to a totally untouched area, and he was having a stable job. Why should you? He said, no, I'm quitting because I can see where nobody else can see. So when people telling you or looking at you as a crazy, you're not a crazy. So you're a dreamer. You create a dream and you create a business. So please live your dream, and you live your dream by having one big R in your agenda called review. So whenever something happens, even every single morning you wake up, just have that R, big R. Review, just looking back and see what is the main milestone, main lessons you have learned throughout your life till this stage, like today, this morning, please try to do this. What was the main lesson I learned, let's say from the last 3 days? What is the one thing comes on the top of my list? What is it? So try to find out, go deep inside you, right? And the engineering nowadays, you know how many disciplines, by the way, are taught at the moment? How many disciplines? By the way, I can't see you much. You know, I see blackout because so much light's coming in my eyes here. And can I see hands up? Anyone would give an answer, would get $1 million this morning? You don't want $1 million? How many disciplines are taught in engineering now? 20. No. You're not too close even. You're too far. Any another guess, please? Are you still wake up, guys? You sure? Because I believe me, I can't see you. By the way, this is for the coming up speakers. You won't see your audience. You please, so do whatever you want to do, right? They see you, you don't see that. They're totally invisible, right? There are 40 disciplines, 40 disciplines, different titles of engineering. That much it's taught at this moment throughout the world. You see the importance of engineers now. So you guys give a pat at your back that you're doing a great job because you're an engineer and you're one of the most wanted. So, but there's one advice here, how to move forward. We know the situation now. We don't need to be clever to read what's happening around us, right? Challenges are there, whether we like it or not. We became part of the agendas of the problems, of the challenges happening globally. Just it happens to be part of the agenda. We're stories now. We're part of the stories are told every single morning. We became more psychological than logical in our thinking process, and that is one of the challenges we're facing. We're pretty much psychological than logical in our thinking process. We need to move, but you can't move without having a soul in the process. That soul is your direction. And you cannot create the direction because the direction is created, is not inherited. When you approve yourself, when you love yourself, then this is the time you create that direction. But that direction cannot be created unless you have a dream and a passion with that dream. They may sound the same, dream and passion, but they're totally different. A dream about go-getter, a dream about your objectives, your goal, the way how you see the future, the way how you read the balance sheet, the way how you read the economy, the way how you read what's happening around us. This is we go-getter. It's about the brain side of you, of the human. All right? And that is the dream. The passion is the bigger picture. The passion is your emotion. Passion is your love. Passion is what drives you to give your best to yourself, to the society, to the family, and to the company you belong to, or to the whole country you live in. That's the passion. And the passion is located in your heart, the big heart, right? So when you have your heart, your passion, and you have your dream, I'm a dreamer, right? They work together, we call them, they synergize. 1 + 1 = 11. So when you create that synergy within, then you know where you're heading to. So the authenticity is born, I should say. Is born out from you. So you know that you need to do something. You need to create a difference at the company level, at the family level, or at the country level. You know that you become a dreamer, that you're full of passion, that you need to do to create something. You need to do something, right? And then you're open to accept the universe, the power in the universe, that positivity which is surrounding all of us. We are all of us surrounded by such a great universe called the positivity. But we are locking our thing, keeping ourselves in silos away from that beautiful energy. Let's do this exercise. If you have this piece of called solar panel as big as this, and all of us, we step for 5 minutes outside under the sun, and we come back here, we can light half of the room because of the energy. Why? Because we're able to tell the universe, Mr. Universe, we're ready to accept the positive power you have, which is through the sun now, and create a difference through the energy. And this is exactly what happened within us. So you as a person, once you discover yourself, your authenticity, then you know where you're heading to. Then that power within is created, and then you create that difference. And then you become like a diamond. So you know what the diamond is. If I tell anyone here in the room, I've got a diamond in my hand, would you believe me? Especially the ladies, they want, I'm sure. So I've got a diamond, everyone got a diamond. So if you ask a physician, physics. In physics, diamonds consist of carbon elements. But they decided to come together, to hug each other, to love each other, to give the right warmth, the right temperature, and they created one of the most, or the hardest, I should say, substance on the globe. And because of the diamond, we were able to drill to the oil, by the way. So the drilling bits, which drills down to the earth, the bits made of diamonds, because it's so hard that can break the rocks. And this is what happened. Once you discover self, authenticity, you bring that great diamond within you, so you can see and you can shake and you can move the world. And this is what's missing from all of us. I think what's need to be done is go back and look within us. It's the right time here, whenever there is something happening, to revisit ourselves and try to recall what we have done, what lesson we have learned, how we can move forward. And as I said, if you take my advice when I started my remarks this morning, is become the brilliant networker of the day-to-day. So give yourself today, as I was told, over 100 plus we have in this lovely room now. So if you are capturing 20% of the market share here, if you would, so you end up with having 20 leads or 20 business cards. I can give you mine, so just in case you want to you recycle it, so I'm supporting the environment. So I've got a couple of business cards. If you're interested, I'm more than happy to share with you later on my dreams. But let me start. I remember Lionel Richie a long time back. He has a lovely song called Hello. Has anyone here heard that song earlier? Yeah? Hello, is it me you're looking for? Yeah? Is anyone looking for me here? No? Not at all? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Right? And that song, he said, let me start by saying I love you, right, isn't it? But here, let me start by saying to the organizer here, not so I love you, but I really like you. Thank you. You did a good job. But by saying a big thank you, you made me a celebrity, by the way. This is my picture, just in case. Right? So we're twin here. It's the same person. Yeah? And at the back, please don't mix up with this gentleman right here, please. We may look the same, but he's totally different. He's up there, right? Called someone Prime Minister of UAE, so I'm not him, please. So don't get mixed up with here. I am here, not here, please. All right? So please be careful. So thank you very much, guys. You've done a good job. Do you still have 1 hour more to speak? Yeah? Thank you very much. So I need to shut up here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid. Thank you so much. That was very inspiring, I would have to say, with dream and passion. And I agree with you. You cannot see anything from here, which is brilliant. So you feel like you're by yourself, talking to yourself, which is fantastic. Anyways, so moving from this point, I would like to invite our panelists for the next session. This session is focused on the value of value engineering and how we can implement value engineering in the planning, design, and construction phase or phases of a project. So, welcoming to the stage from Aerolink, Robert Mernilli, from ALEC, Tom Gilmartin, from Alimco, Rob McDonald, Dressen Sommer Morgan Tuckness, FNG, Stephen Batchelor, and from Select, Benoit McNamara. So please join me in welcoming the panelists to the stage. All right, we have a full house, I would say. So before we start and before we start talking about value engineering, I would love to ask each one of you is just to give a literally 30-second introduction about your name, what you do, and the company that you work for. So I will start with Robert.
Thanks, Sama. Robert Marinelli, working as General Manager of Aerolink. 13 years experience here in the UAE and in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and still enjoying it. Still enjoying the game.
Excellent, excellent.
Tom Gilmartin, Business Development Manager with Alec Fit-Out. Been working with Alec Fit-Out for 8 years now. We specialise in turnkey fit-out of 5-star hotels, airports, cinemas and luxury mixed-use developments.
Good to have you, Tom. Thanks.
Robert MacDonald, I'm the Senior Estimating Manager at Alemco, MEP, and I've been here for 10 years with Alemco.
Morgan Tuckness with recent summer, Head of Global Hospitality Technical Services and Design Development. Architect by trade, hospitality development by craft, and second year in Dubai, previously from Singapore, and happy to be here.
Benoit McNamara from Select Group. I'm the design manager for a real estate developer, mainly involved in Dubai Marina, and now moving to the Business Bay. Been in Dubai for 5 years with 15 years experience as an architect as well.
Stephen Batchelor, Faithful and Gould, Operations Director, 11 years in the UAE, 20 years experience. We specialise in hospitality, retail, residential developments, and we're doing okay at the moment, and we're enjoying it. So
Fantastic. Well, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for taking from your valuable time and being here today. Moving very quickly direct into our topic. When we're talking about value engineering, one of the things that I've shared earlier on in one of the slides about the definition of value engineering, and I think each one of us has a different perspective. So I would start with Morgan, as they say, ladies first. Can you please just give me your view about what is value engineering from your own experience and your own perspective?
Sure. Value engineering, as you said, I think rightfully, Samir, it's a balance, right? It is a balance of scope, schedule, and budget. What we're all trying to do is create effective ways and cost-effective developments. That can only be done by balancing that. And value engineering is a little bit of a misnomer. The term was coined after World War II, after shortage of materials. The new thing that we're all afraid of is hearing that word value engineering, right? It's really about value management and value creation. We're trying to create the optimal product with the end user in mind for the minimal amount of cost. So that's what value engineering is and needs to be. It's about value creation and management.
Okay. Do you all guys agree with Morgan?
Very well put.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Good. This is starting off well.
There we go. That's a good start.
I mean, much more articulate than I may be able to do. But I suppose straight out the gate, like Morgan and yourself said, that balancing act, it's about really trying to stretch the capabilities, the budgets that you have. So I suppose what would be fair, especially for the audience and for the subject, is to very quickly dispel cost saving and value engineering. They're completely two different animals.
Yeah.
Cost saving is de-scoping and that, and value engineering really is trying to stretch that envelope. And I think even your opening sermon, if for lack of a better word, talked about balancing, and even Dr. Rashid said we have the capabilities, we have the access to 40 different types of discipline. It really is and we have a great, not exactly 40, but we have across the board the spectrum here in engineering, clients. It's about, I think, using those capabilities and really exploring what you can get out of those disciplines to bring value and to increase the performance to the end user.
In the MEP business, obviously we're generally first in line on target value engineering, and that can go either way. It can be done either very responsibly or irresponsibly. Funny enough, Ben was one of our clients at the moment. We're doing a large-scale development for him at Marina Gate. And they approached us, and we went through a systematic value engineering process where, as a principle, we tend not to value engineer any of the mechanical plant, obviously because that's the heart and soul of the MEP. And we focused on dead systems basically, so cable containments, tray, pipe, and every decision we made was in conjunction with Select Group, their engineer, and their facilities management guys who played a huge role in all that, to what they would accept and what they wouldn't, and what we proposed, I think 100% of it was responsible proposals. About 80% of it got through to the benefit of the client. We got no benefit out of it. And you know, one of those towers is complete and open and occupied now, and I think Joe Benwell will tell you he's very happy with the product.
You know, the biggest challenge that we face most of the times that we're not all aligned about the value engineering objective or what we're trying to achieve. You know, it's easy sometimes when you go and meet with your client and you're a consultant or you're a contractor, or even when you're a developer and you say, I would love to conduct a value engineering workshop. Do you think most of the people or all of the people in that room are aligned to the same objective? I think this is where it becomes a little bit challenging, and this is where I can ask Tom from, you know, a contractor point of view, how do you feel about that?
Alignment is a core focus at ALEC and ALEC Fit-Out. What you need to make sure is that you have the client, the consultant team, and the contractor all understanding where they want to go. You have a design intent and you have a budget. And as part of the bidding team, you will sit with the client, typically their procurement guys, and it's very important that you schedule and outline the V that's proposed, and it's agreed in principle by the client or the consultant team. Where the alignment sometimes fails is then taking it from that to site.
Yep.
Because sometimes you can have different teams, and the value engineering that's proposed as part of the bidding is then rejected on site, and then that leads to conflict and it leads to delays. And I think this is a key area where we have to try and manage it and try and educate people on implementing value engineering.
But isn't that what F&G should be doing?
Well, I personally believe that we lose a lot of opportunities with the contractor to value engineer by the contractor coming into the project too late. The contractor should be brought on board earlier with their expertise as part of the team to give the client real value. At the moment, the contractor's coming on very late. What opportunities are there really for the contractor to be part of that team to value engineer the project? It's limited mainly to MEP. If they go for the structural, often the onus is on the contractor then to redesign it under the FIDIC, etc., which puts a lot of pressure on them. And if there's delays, the contractor's the one who's going to get attacked. So, slightly going off subject, you need to change the whole procurement route to get the value engineering to really work how it should do in this region.
I think this is a valid point, but Morgan, sorry, you want to say something?
Well, I think it's interesting on the priorities, setting the priorities from the get-go. And this goes for all of us. It doesn't matter what side of the business you sit on. If you're the developer, if you're the consultant, the design consultant, or if you're the contractor. Those priorities need to be set up correctly from the beginning from the client side, right? Don't tell me that you want a Cartier watch if you only have the cost for a Timex, right? So it's about expectation and managing that expectation of creating that sense of value and starting that process off correctly. And that's with pre-planning and making sure that the developer and the client side, you have the right intel in your organizations that can offer you insight on your feasibilities, making sure that you're looking at the long-term life cycle of these projects and identifying your priorities to communicate effectively with your clients and your consultants. If your client can't and the developer can't effectively communicate to the consultants, what are they supposed to do, right?
Yep.
So they have to set that standard from the get-go. And it does vary from building type. You know, we can all say in the industry one building is the same as another, but the reality is the investment is very different. So what the financial requirements are for a residential tower, for instance, are very different than what the returns need to be for a hotel or a data center or industrial. So I think on the consultant side, the contractor side, and on the developer side, understanding what the priorities are from a financial metrics, that will help you make and identify the scope of what's important to you. Is it today cost? Is it long-term cost? And being able to align that from the beginning. And that just sets the stage for a successful process all the way through.
Fantastic. So I'll take, sorry. Binoy.
Yeah, just to answer to what you were saying about the contractor involvement, that's the direction we're heading as a developer now. We're trying to do early contractor involvement to avoid being in a situation where we would do cost cutting, which would be camouflaged as value engineering, because you're absolutely right. There is confusion on the terminology. Sometimes developer or clients will camouflage value engineering project and cost cutting into value engineering. Well, it should be about creating value, and I think the VE, to go back to a bit to what you were saying, is more about taking the time to assess the project either at concept or at construction, and to see where the value is or where the capital is spent, and decide if there's a better return on your investment by moving some of the cable tray and freeing up a bit of money to do better front of house or creating more return for your investment, with, like you were saying.
Was that part of your experience with Alemco?
Yeah, I think that's one of the success that we have in Marina
You
Gate
don't have
project.
to be nice, you can say
I think it's a very successful project, honestly, and we have more successful, less successful project. This one was a very good collaboration, and that's the key word, collaboration. Even though it's not always perfect, you have to work with your consultant and your contractor to get the best product in the end. And that's done through value engineering, where you actually don't cost cut, but you take the time and you decide where you're gonna invest. So if I can save a bit here to create a better lobby, a better room, a better experience for the end user, if it's a residential tower, or a better classroom if it's a classroom, then it's worth it. In the end, you get the same quality.
If I want to just go one step back,
Sorry.
We've got 3 key messages here that we were just talking about. The first one starting with early engagement, not necessarily the contractor, but probably all the stakeholders on board. We're talking about setting the priorities, and I would like to combine your message with Benoit's message between communication and collaboration as well. So really 3 things here that we're talking about. But the biggest question that we normally ask ourselves, and if we want to implement this, when? Let's not talk about how, because how, I think we have other sessions throughout the day to address how we're going to implement value engineering and how we're going to take it forward. But my key question is, when do we start with value engineering? Any takers?
Always. We started from the beginning. This is a continual process. It doesn't need to be, and as we said, you do not wait, and you do not want to wait till the last phase of a project, because that is when you're going to get the minimal amount of return on your value engineering, right? So this is a continual process from the get-go, from scope setting to design management to construction to asset management. It's a full life cycle, and every single person involved in the project has a responsibility to that value engineering process and that value management process. It's one of those things where if you see something, say something. As a design consultant, if they see a better way to do something or a more effective way to do something, say something, raise it to your client. If the client sees something as a priority and says, you know what, the economy has changed and I really need to optimize this, and I need your help, say it. The more that you can communicate with effectively to your team, the more you can all solve the same problem. But it's a continual process through the entire project.
Got you. How would you do that, Rob?
Look, I think when is definitely one of the big questions. I mean, everybody has a different agenda based on the timeline of the project.
Absolutely.
Generally, the MEP value engineering is done during the tender process. So if they go to 5, 6 MEP contractors, you're going to get all these different value engineering options, and the agenda of the MEP contractor during the tender stage is to win the job. It's not a collaborative approach from the MEP industry. We're literally putting anything and everything on the table to try and win the job. Whereas post-award, it's a bit more relaxed, there's more thought put into it, and you're not doing it independently, you're doing it in conjunction with the consulting engineer.
The application of value engineering can happen across the scope. It can happen at any time, but as we know, and as the panel have said, the earlier you introduce it into the team, the better you're going to get, the more you're going to get out of it. And I think Steve said it best. If you can find the time, and that's what we're all poor on. We're all poor on time. If you can find the time, and I think the clients and the end users are disciplined enough to gather those people and to really explore those opportunities around the table. The early introduction, they gave it a name, early contractor involvement. There is a mechanism where you can bring in a contractor or an MEP people there's NDAs, and maybe even pay those people for their time.
Services, yeah.
Exactly, and then still put them out into the market to tender competitively. But it's just, again, finding the time and having the discipline to do that.
But to be fair to ourselves as well, and not to keep hammering ourselves, we are the owners of the time in one way or another. We can control that. I know that most of the time, you have to go back to your client, to the developer or to the governmental entity to address these situations. But I still believe that we are also in power as well. And if there is something that we want to change, then we can bring it on and we can actually make that effort. And I can tell you that, most of our clients will do listen to you when you have a key valued point that you want to address. I'm not sure what did you face, Tom, when you're working on various projects when the clients are not paying attention to value engineering. Did you manage to convince them other way?
It depends. So if you're tendering against the market, it's very difficult and you're not really empowered because a competitor will always say yes, whether it's a crazy budget, a crazy program. They'll commit to it, and if you don't, somehow you're out of the race. What we like to try and do at Alec Fit Out, because we have a lot of repeat clientele, we will bid against the market to make sure that we're competitive, but then somehow you enter into a negotiation process with the client. And then you sit down and you look to interrogate from a fit-out point of view the key packages, the key trades, where there is value. So typically marble, joinery, FF&E. And if you're in that situation where you're negotiating, you have a mature client, you have a good consultant team, yes, you are empowered, and certainly you can bring value. But it's a very challenging market.
Yeah. Steve?
I mean, I want to go back to what Morgan mentioned earlier. She referenced value management, which is at the inception of the project. It's setting out the parameters of the project, how you're going to drive it forward to give the client value. And the value management sets these parameters. The team is working together, the early team. You're bringing on the cost consultant, the design consultants. You can get input from contractors as well. All the stakeholders are involved. And then you can move on to value engineering once the project is going in the right direction. At the moment, the value engineering is, as we said before, is cost cutting to get it back on target at the end of the project. But if the project's set up correctly to start with the correct program, as others are mentioning, a sufficient program, and the procedures, and everyone buying into it, you can achieve this. But I don't believe it is working the way it should do at the moment.
Well, is it not working because of the fact that we don't have the time to invest in value engineering, or because we're not aligned, or again, going back to the question number one, that we don't really understand what is value engineering?
I think a lot of it relates to time. The programs are so short on projects, and to actually propose value engineering, get it provisionally approved, and that takes a lot of time, because you will submit a sample or you'll submit a value engineering solution, and it can take 2, 3, 4 weeks to try and get that approved. And if you have a program as a fit out for say 6 months, you don't have time to play around with value engineering, so it's a crash. But if you can have a more realistic program, if you can have more time, then I think you can successfully implement value engineering.
There's also the risk, again, going back to the timeline, if you as an MEP contractor during a tender stage and you come up with something clever and you commit to that value engineer option and you re-engineer it, the risk is that that option, once it gets submitted, goes out to the market and the work that you put in is wasted. Someone else picks it up and...
Sure. Trust me, I faced that in the past. We had a proposal, and I asked the team to put another approach or an option, and really to put some real focus on value engineering. And we submitted both options, but we were not successful, and we realized that one of our competitors actually won the job, but with the option that we have presented. So it does happen. But to be honest with you, that should not stop us from doing our own value engineering as well.
Wouldn't you say that to some extent, Robert, that the value engineering process, if the engineering part of the project had enough time and enough resource to design your project exactly to your needs of the client, and I know, especially in this market, we're really pressured to deliver at fast pace, so there's, I wouldn't say a tendency, but there is a risk of copy-pasting specification, of not going in full depth in the design process and then just putting something to tender, and then you end up value engineering because you end up with specification which are over spec, detailed which are repeated, and that there's that opportunity. If time was taken prior tender, during the process, fully understanding each specific project and designing your documentation accordingly, then you wouldn't have anything to value engineer because it would be perfectly done.
Sorry,
which
Morgan,
is maybe
you wanted to say
impossible.
something.
I think the panel's hit on some key items on the timing. In the GCC and in Dubai in general, that we are speed to market. We need to be on site as quickly as possible. We need to be churning out design documents as quickly as possible. And that's one of the fundamental issues that we have with value engineering in this region versus doing work in Australia or the US or other parts of the world where maybe a traditional methodology of traditional delivery of design bid build, where you actually are going out to tender on a more structured set of documents. Here it's speed to market of getting on the ground and moving dirt around as quickly as possible, which is great in certain aspects, and it may be necessary in certain projects, but where I think Dubai is currently is evolving, quite frankly. It's becoming more mature, where we're realizing, speed to market is important, absolutely. But we need to spend a little bit more time on our assumptions. We need to spend a little bit more time validating it, getting peer reviews, making sure we know what we're doing before we actually start bringing equipment to the site, we start going out to tender, and we lock ourselves in. And then all of a sudden, we deliver a project, and we're going, wow, we overbuilt. We have too much stuff. Or we didn't think about this. And I think that's where there's an opportunity for, especially in this market. It's evolving. And it's becoming more mature, where we need to spend a little bit extra time on the pre-development phase and the design phase to make sure, let's look around the table at all of our consultants. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Is it cost effective?
That's a very valid point. We have to keep in mind how young the country is. And it is a very dynamic market out there, very competitive. So many opportunities, and you have to compete against that, against those market conditions. You can't share too many of your experiences, but I do believe that collaborative approach is the sustainable approach. It's the one that you are measured by. The companies, especially the caliber of companies that are represented today, they are known because of their expertise and what they can offer back to the industry and to the client.
I agree with Robert. Obviously, the collaborative approach is the way forward. One thing I'd just like to touch on, particularly on the MEP value engineering approach, is I know fake news is a big thing at the moment, but there's fake VE out there as well, and it's definitely affecting the MEP tendering process. Recently, we were involved in a tender. The particular contractor put some numbers on the table. They were very attractive VE options, and that contractor got awarded on that basis. But it turned out they were target VE options, of which none of them really got past the consultant engineer or the client. So that contractor was then credited back with the value of the VE that he put on the table to win the tender, and it's fake VE is the new fake news.
Just going back to F&G from project management, cost consultancy perspective, how do you measure the success of what we call value engineering? Because we're engineers by the end of the day, and we're talking about 40 different disciplines, but we all love numbers by the end of the day. Aside from architects, they love fancy things. They don't care about numbers. But from your perspective, how can you present it to your client in a measurable way so that they can actually feel it, so that they can link it, they can make sense of it?
I mean, the client at the end of the day is looking at the CapEx. They don't tend to look at the OpEx so much because they think that's someone else's problem. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Depending on what kind of building, but yes, it can be right.
Yeah, they're looking at the CapEx costs generally. So obviously value engineering is meant to give better value. It's a substitute which will improve the performance of the building or the value of the building, etc., but not lessen the product. So at the end of the day, they're just looking at the baseline figure. If we substitute this for this, or this procurement route for this procurement route, what is the cost benefit to us? That's all they want to know at the end of the day.
But aren't you moving now back into what we call cost reduction, and then we forget
No,
about
but-
the
but you're
quality
not-
and the time and...
You're not lessening the product.
Okay.
I mean, that's the whole idea of value
But you're not
engineering.
improving at the same
to be,
time.
It's meant to be the same or better.
Okay.
Cost cutting is reducing the quality of the product, which is what we tend to see here to get jobs over the line at tender stage, etc.
Or simply de-scoping.
Or simply de-scoping as well.
Yeah.
But you know,
So that's totally different, and that is what we're really dealing with at the moment. I mean, we'd all love to do proper value engineering, but it's not happening how it should do.
Do we address value engineering towards the clients, or towards the contractors, or towards the end users? And I will, just support this question with a very simple example. I was working on a project, and we were to select different types of elevators. Some of them has 5 seconds delays, and some of them has 3 seconds delay. The 5 seconds delay is actually cheaper. So the developer wanted to put the 5 seconds delay elevator because it's cheaper. The consultant who was working on the project thought about it from a different perspective. That yes, the 3 seconds delay elevator is actually more expensive, but down the line for the end user, it will consume less electricity. So you will have to pay less for the electricity bill, and it's more sustainable. And that was a challenge. That was a challenge. Which party do you really want to focus on? Are you focusing on, again, going back to the sustainable parts and the end users, or you're focusing on the capital cost? How would you create the right balance?
But it's a balancing act, as you were rightfully saying a bit earlier. Yes, if you're looking purely at cost, you can go for the slower lift, but then it's your reputation, it's your brand identity. There's so many other aspects than just the capex cost that you factor in when you take this decision as a collaborative effort. So yes, the consultant will think one way, the architect will think the other way, the developer, but in the end, you got to do what's right for the project. And I think that's the main thing. It's thinking of the project in itself as a legacy in a way. You want that building to stand there for a long time and that people remember it in a good way.
I think you've hit on something very, very interesting. Bad value engineering, you'll notice. Good value engineering, the end user should never know it even existed, right? It's like bad design. Good design of a building, you don't even really notice it. It just flows. You walk through a space and it makes sense. You don't have to look at the signage really that much to understand where the restrooms are or where to go on their circulation path. Bad design, you'll never outrun. And it's the same thing with value engineering. If you do it poorly, that will be felt for the entire life cycle, from an end user to the systems management to the OpEx of the project, and that ripple effect will continue. So good value engineering should be invisible.
So when we're talking about value engineering, really, what are really the tools that we need to have in our lockers, in our experience, to implement value engineering? What do I need to bring to the table to implement value engineering? We talked about what, we talked about when, we talked about setting the priorities. The question is, do we have the right tools to bring in value engineering to our projects?
For me, you need a good, experienced builder. You need to bring him in early. You need to introduce him into the design early, and but I truly believe, and the rest of the panel will have their opinion. But that everything we've said today, bringing in the available tools that you have, and as Dr. Rashid said, there are 40 different consultants, and they can be acoustic experts, which will probably benefit the end user, energy consultants, structural engineers, bringing the people in, collaborating, offering those opportunities, exploring it, and in the end, it's always the clients.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So constructability, can I say?
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that. Bringing in, I suppose, exploring that design for its end user capability, obviously against the budget and the expectation for quality, but also by bringing in the builder, you're adding the buildability into that formula.
So experts is one. Tom, do you want to add to that?
Well, your expertise, but it's a team. You need to have a number of functions working to successfully implement value engineering. So from a fit-out point of view, obviously look at the interior finishing of a hotel, for example. So there's a lot of design detailing. Sometimes a design can be over-designed. You can look at simplifying a design. So you're still achieving the aesthetic, but by simplifying it, you're achieving a higher quality on site, and it's a quicker finish. So it's not just a cost benefit, it's more about time and quality. But when you need a team, so you need to have your design guys, your procurement guys, estimators, the operations guys to look at the buildability practicality of the design. So when you look at value, there's a number of components, and when you have that team working together with a client who knows what they want. So the client, if they want to, say, reduce their budget from 100 to 80, they have to make sacrifices to do that.
Sure.
So you need to be able to isolate where you want to do the value engineering and get buy-in from the client, and then obviously from the consultant team. They also have to be on board. So again, it's getting back to your alignment, making sure that everybody is agreeing where they need to end up.
Just on that point, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep pushing it. When you're talking about value engineering, you talked about cost reduction at the same time and cutting the budget. But let's put that on the side for a second. How is value engineering linked to sustainability when it comes to fit out? You're talking about sustainable items, you're talking about, and sustainability is a big thing. And actually the definition of sustainability is also not known for a lot of people when they talk about sustainable buildings. But from your experience as a fit out contractor, putting that sustainability approach with value engineering, do they conflict or are they aligned?
To be honest, sustainability comes typically more into play with the MEP systems. From a fit out point of view and the finishes that we look at, we are trying to achieve a specification, and obviously there's a life cycle of the finishes, and then within a hotel there will be, say, a refurbishment after 10 years. So from a sustainability point of view, not typically that's the requirement from fit out.
Got you. Is that what you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think it goes back to being responsible on your approach to value engineering. I'll go back to Benoit's building, which is a green building, and he's got grey water articulation, he's got heat pumps instead of water heaters, and he had a limited total connected load provided by DWA, so he was very restricted in what he could have and what he couldn't have. But none of those items were ever targeted as value engineering. None of the sustainability items were ever touched from a value engineer.
Do you bring the right tools into your business when it comes to value engineering?
Yeah, I think you have to have a very strong engineering department within your MEP contracting, and you have to have a very strong consultant engineer on the design, and a client who is willing to get all three in the same room and trash it out. Yeah.
Morgan, what are your tools?
The tools that I would use is, one, looking at the technology. I think that's one thing that there's a session later today that we've kind of overlooked a little bit in this panel, but it is a reality of what we're living with. And there's amazing capabilities with tools like BIM modeling and things like that, which are really incredibly helpful to try and cut down costs and kind of look ahead at any issues on coordination. But there are limitations to that. There are limitations to those tools. They're very well advanced, but and we can use it for a certain percentage. But again, to the panel's point, there is a variety of different things that needs to come in when it comes to the sustainability, the building type. What is important to you long term, right? And understanding where, again, back to the original discussion, back to the priorities of the project. Sustainability for Dubai is a very, I don't want to say a new thing, but we're now in the built environment phase, in the life cycle phase of these buildings that, were built in the boom of the market, and now all these buildings are now coming up for renovation and refurbishment. So Dubai is kind of starting to get into that first cycle of, again, evolving and maturing in a market and seeing, okay, we did it like this the first time. Maybe we realized this was not actually the correct technique or the correct material to use. So I think there's a huge learning curve where Dubai really is excelling right now, where the consultants, the developers, and everyone around the table realizes that we've got some lessons learned from the last 10, 15 years in Dubai.
Yeah. Ben, from
well,
Select Group?
You put it rightly, lesson learned. I think that this value engineering the main tool for value engineering is a state of mind. It's about being able to listen and question yourself, question all the stakeholder, and being able to take a step back and change the way you do things. Too often we are following the same path every project where we are. I'm not sure how to say that, like a horse blindfolded, or you have a track, and some people are reluctant to change. Value engineering is doing a workshop and trying to think other ways of doing things, and to go on the sustainability aspect. You could specify a material which comes from the States, and you could have the same or similar material which comes locally, and you would achieve a better value, and you would also improve your footprint, carbon footprint, because you don't import. So there are things that can be done to improve the sustainability and achieve a better value, because that saving could be passed along to something else in the project, better insulation, better. So there's
Absolutely, absolutely. Steve, what do you think about it?
Obviously, a lot of the sustainability which impacts myself financially is the OPEX costs, going back to that. And generally the OPEX team doesn't get involved so much in the early stages of the project. If they could be more involved, they'd get the benefit, what they want from the project going forward. So,
Well, on that point, I would like really to get the audience a little bit engaged, and I hope that that coffee in the morning is still working. It hasn't faded away, so we're still having some kind of attention here. Does anyone have any questions or comments that you would like to bring to the stage or to address with one of our panelists? Any questions? I'm sorry I can't see clearly, but just in any case. We have a question there. Yeah? Can you please just mention your name and your company?
Hi, my
Hello.
name is Ismail from Wasl, Ismail Khaki from Wasl, which is developers. Thank you for the summit, and appreciate the audience and all the panels. The problem is, I think we are facing is about the value engineering is, as per FIDIC, for example, there is like profit sharing, which is 50-50. The problem is we are facing it. I know we started with value engineering, but we end up with cost reductions.
Yeah.
In a majority of whatever we do, okay, we change this marble to this marble, or we change this glass or aluminum section to aluminum section. We change this AC to this another AC, which basically we see it as a developer. It is more in cost reduction than the value engineering. Or we afraid of ending that we went in cost reduction route. That's why when we do a lot of value engineering and cost reduction as well. And I think I met some of the people are here. We done several projects. We would like, as a developer, we would like to start it as a cost reduction, if it's value engineering, or we have a proposal which we call it profit sharing.
Gotcha.
Rather than, because for us it's a cost. And as you said, also other thing is the problem is that one of the other issue, we have ego issue, to be honest. When the contractor comes on board and propose something as a value engineering, they will have a lot of resistance from the engineer. Because he done a design is not economic design, where he's supposed to do economic design for the client, to be honest. That's where they will find a lot of other resistance. That's why the value engineering is not much successful in this market, for example. So these are the other aspects. For sure, we would like to have the contractor on board in the beginning, but there should be a cost which I have agreed with them, because, for example, if I have the concept, they will not do for me engineering free of cost.
Yeah.
And there is engineer is already he get paid to do that design.
True.
So for me, I would like, shall I pay this guy or that guy? There is always value for money, and today the value or the money is very important in today's market. To be honest, with the situation which we are in, the market is not going down, but the situation in the market.
Which is fantastic. I think you have really some good valid points. We're talking about value engineering, but we suddenly deviate from that and it becomes a pure cost reduction. We're talking about alignment and clarity about what exactly we're trying to achieve. Is that something any of...
Yeah, but it's getting back to what we've spoken about. There's a disconnect between sometimes the procurement and the operations. So you have a design, you will tender it or negotiate it, but if you are proposing value engineering, you have to agree this in principle before you start work on site.
Yeah.
You know, it's very important, and then take the time then to obviously get it approved. You don't want to start proposing value engineering that's not agreed in advance because it leads to conflict.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it needs to be documented because this is very important to protect both the client and the contractor.
Gotcha.
Just you're saying you're getting resistance from the engineer that did the design originally, and that's the engineer's job. He designed it. He's probably designed the best system you can possibly get out there for you as a client, and it's very important that the engineer resists value engineering if it's not suitable.
If it's not suitable, but
Yeah.
I think where the gentleman's comment was mainly focusing on that there is a resistance regardless whether if it's valuable or not. Because it's our design, it's an ego thing rather than a valuable input into the equation, which what we really should leave behind when we come to the table talking about.
Sure, but from
value
an MEP
engineering.
point of view, you're dealing with a very complex systems, a lot of parts that all talk to each other. So, for instance, if the engineer specified a chiller that cost $1 million dirhams, and somebody wanted to value engineer it down to $500,000, it's not going to be the same product. It's not going to do the same thing. It's not going to last the same amount of time. If with the $1 million dirham chiller you get a 2-year warranty, and somebody else is offering a product for 1.2 million dirhams and you're getting a 10 million dirham warranty, that's value engineering. Even though you're paying more as a client, that's better value.
Absolutely. Morgan?
I think there's two amazing things that you talked about. One of the things that we, but one of the things that I think is key is trust in your consultants, right? And again, as designers and consultants and anybody who is on the consulting side, we need to look at ourselves from an ego standpoint and not be precious. Not be precious. We are all, extreme professionals in our discipline, and we're very good at our discipline. But we shouldn't be worried about someone else questioning what decisions have been made.
Yep.
And quite frankly, it's one of those things that, when you're in university or going through school and you'd write a paper for class, and you try to proofread it all the way through, and sometimes you miss one of the most basic mistakes, a typo or something, because you're reading it from your perspective. Sometimes it takes a peer review. Sometimes it takes somebody else to come in and take a look at it and say, yeah, this makes sense on your design, but maybe you could do this. And I think that's one thing, is one, trusting in your experts, trusting getting valuable experts from up front, and two, as on the consulting side, making sure that we're not precious about holding on the information. We know that everybody has the best intention, and we all have the perspective on it, but don't be afraid to get a colleague or a peer to kind of review the work and say, look, do you see any opportunities to make this better?
Trust, that's a big word. Any other questions from the audience? We have one there in the middle, if you don't mind, please.
So my name is Azam Khalid. I'm the CEO of Kobex Middle East. And Kobex is a system that we use in the slabs in order to reduce on the concrete and steel quantities. We do value engineering. We support engineering offices with value engineering, but we usually have two problems. The first problem is there is always no time to redo or get the system or any new system involved in the design of the engineering office or the consultant. And the second problem that we usually have is like the party, whether it is the engineering office or the client or the contractor, they look at the direct pure cost. So we prepare, for example, a value engineering report that includes engineering benefits, which finally they go into money, right? And but usually like when you submit a report, the counterparty will just look at the final digit, the digits that how much saving or what is the total cost that you're talking about. So they don't look usually in the same report, like in the values, in the real engineering values, which again, they translate these values, engineering values, into money.
Yep.
So these time and focusing only on the one digit, the money.
Absolutely. I think that's another valid point, which in line with what we talked about earlier, really how to measure the value engineering. Is it really purely money, or is it quality, or is it time, or is it the process, or is it the end users, or the developers, or the contractors, consultant equation? It's a great balance between everyone. I'm sorry we're running out of time. Very interesting discussion that we had from all of you. I'm just going to ask you for a personal favor. Dr. Rashid earlier today really inspired me personally with a simple equation that he had. He said, everybody can have a dream, but that dream is just a dream, and without passion, there is no synergy between the two. And we're going to be meeting together next year from now. And I hope that Gavin will invite, the rest of the people. If anyone is not required for next year, you need to tell them from now. So
It's a fraternity now.
Yeah.
just to make sure. So when we come back next year, we don't really want to go back and talk about exactly the same thing. Let's talk about what we have achieved in value engineering over the year. I'm sorry to say it, but every time we get together, we talk about things, and the year after, we sit down and we're still talking about the same thing. Oh, how are we going to implement? How are we going to do? And how are we going to make a difference? Well, stop with the how. We've talked enough about the how. Let's implement. And this is really the favor that I'm going to ask you as a panelist and the rest of the audience. If you even can write it down on the booklet, on the agenda, what am I going to do different this year to implement value engineering and take it forward? So next year, when we sit down around the table, we want to talk about achievements. You know what? I'm going to ask you guys, what have you achieved over last year? And you say, I've done this and this and that, and the outcome was this and that. Maybe I was fired out of the project. I lost money here, but guess what? No, I made a success. I provided a quality project. My client was happy, the end user was happy. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Please join me in thanking the panelists for their time and input. Thank you so much. Thank you. Upon the organizer's request, we're just going to deviate literally for 5 minutes away from the agenda. I believe we need a refreshment and we need a cup of coffee. But before we leave for that cup of coffee, I would really like to thank our key speaker for today, for his inspiring, passionate words that he brought with him early this morning. And I have to say just one last thing before we go. Dr. Rashid was here at 7:30 a.m. That's how much he was committed to this Value Engineering Summit. That's how much he was keen and passionate about delivering a keynote to all of us. So, Dr. Rashid, thank you again for being with us. It's been a pleasure. And please join me in thanking Dr. Rashid again. And 5 minutes coffee break, but please, nothing more than 5 minutes so that we can get together for our next panel session. Thank you so much. All right, well, moving to our next session about value engineering in infrastructure projects. And for this session, I would like to invite from AESG, Barry Wormald to be the moderator for the session. So please join me in welcoming Barry to the stage.
I understand what he meant earlier when he said you can't see the audience. It really is bright. I'd like to invite my panelists to join me on the stage, if you could come up, please. We have Chris Vennemore from AECOM, Rob Kennedy from Cundall, Frederick Ledgeron from Parsons. We have Majid, who stood in at last minute. I'm told he was asked at 8 o'clock last night to join the presentation, so thanks very much, Majid, at late notice. Mohammed Khan and Paquito Jacinto from SEWA. So, yes, I think you can hear me clearly. What I'd like to do, first of all, is ask each of the panelists to give a brief introduction of themselves, who they work for, and what particular field they work in. So if you could start off, Jacinto.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paquito. I'm working as a head project manager for Sharjah Electricity and Water Authority as under the PMO Executive Office. I've been here in the Middle East for 30 years, 10 years in Oman and 20 years now here in the UAE. And mostly I've been involved in variety of disciplines from irrigation and landscaping to building construction and also infrastructure. Electricity and water network, including drainage system and RO plants and STP as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, everyone. My name is Mohammad Najib Khan. I am from Abu Dhabi Municipality, working as a technical advisor in road, bridges, infrastructure. I have been there with the municipality 8 years and in the country around 13 years, a total of 22 or 23 years of experience. I am a certified value specialist, AVS, Associate Value Specialist, and actively involved in Abu Dhabi Municipality for implementing and writing procedures with regards to value engineering.
Hello everyone, my name is Majid Edisan. I've been part of the roads department at the Ministry of Infrastructure Development for 4 years. I'm more involved in sustainability and development of current infrastructure, and more specifically the federal roads network.
My name is Frédéric Lejean. I'm a Vice President at Parsons. I'm in the region for the last 5 years where I manage large infrastructure projects such as expressways and big structures. Before that, I worked in Canada, the US, and a number of European countries as well.
My name is Rob Kennedy. I'm the Infrastructure Director for Kundal in the Middle East. I've been in the region now for 3 years. I've been in the industry for just over 20 years now, with my experience spanning from military engineering to contracting to my current role in Kundal that I've been for 12 years as a consultant.
Good morning, my name is Chris Venamore. I'm also an infrastructure director for AECOM, or as the Americans call it, AECOM. I've been in the Gulf for around 18 years, just clocked up 30 years of experience, purely in infrastructure. In the 18 years that I've been in the Middle East, I've been mainly focused on things like roads, bridges, sewage treatment plants, that sort of infrastructure.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. I first worked in the Middle East a long time ago, but I came back here to live only 5 weeks ago. So I'm still adjusting to the way things are done here. But one of the things I have found is that value engineering is something that is discussed in every conference, almost in every part of the world, and the same things are discussed every year. Nothing seems to change. And if nothing changes, nothing will change. So we do need to make some changes in the way we do things. Otherwise, we're not going to increase or improve our efficiencies. Infrastructure itself is a bit more complex, I think, than developing buildings, because you're trying to develop something for a future which is not really that clear and could change instantly. So creating value and flexibility is a specific challenge for infrastructure. A couple of the key words I took from the previous discussion was about trust and change. You have to have trust in your designers, so that whatever you're developing, if you pick a design team, have trust in them. Because if you don't, there's always going to be, the interaction will never run smoothly, and there'll always be an insecurity. And the designers from their side have to be flexible and understand that if things do change, they have to have an open mind. So when I moved to India 7 years ago, if any of you have been to India, it is a massive country with massive infrastructure problems. And I lived in a city called Gurgaon, which had 12 million people, and they developed the city, then developed the infrastructure. And I thought that was quite a smart way of doing it, because they didn't waste money on infrastructure. But from a policy of getting around the place and wanting to live there, it was a terrible place to live. So I'd like to ask first of all, Frederick to just answer, in his experience, why do we need to carry out VE? Does it mean that the wrong team have been selected? Or is somebody missing from the team? Or is the client briefing correct? In your experience, Frederick, what is the reason behind needing VE?
Well, I mean, obviously we do see like a little bit of, engineering that can be improved, but most of the time engineering is, even if the teams are doing a very fantastic job, there's still opportunities to value engineering project. I think when you look at this, the design process is a very iterative process where we take a number of decisions on the daily basis, right? We select this type of structure, that type of road, pavement, and everything. And at one point, we need to sit down, look at everything, and see if everything is working together and see if there is place for improvement, right? I'll give an example. For example, Parsons, we work a lot in design and build. Okay, it's a like of procurement method that's when we talk about value engineering, this is very aggressive in terms of value engineering. And recently we did a project. There was a lot of structures, maybe 100 structures in the project, so it's a lot of things to do. If we look at each structure separately, we'll have a different type of structure, right? I mean, every structure will be optimized for its own location, span, length, type, whatever. But when we work with a contractor, they'll think about differently, right? They think about, it has to be standardized because I don't want to do a different structure every time. I want to have something that can reuse from one structure to another. So basically, what we look at is maybe each structure is individually not optimum. It might be that none of the structure is optimum individually, but globally, when we look at the overall project, all of a sudden it becomes a very optimum project for the contractor. So I think this is something that when we do value engineering, we have, every time we do some progress, some design, we have to sit down, look at the overall picture, and talk to the client and see what can be done. Other example that comes to mind is like maybe sometimes, in some of the project we had some interchange, very big interchange, and we do a very fantastic design for these interchanges. But when we're at the end of the day, the cost might be a little high, or maybe there is some issues, right? So we look at the project, and even if everybody in the room has provided the best engineering, the best things, there is still places for optimize the project to find some new ways to, for example, connect some road and change the configuration of interchange. We have some project where we change totally the configuration of interchange and reducing the cost very significantly because of just the optimization of the overall shape of the interchange. And this is possible where we have already one solution. We get one solution, we look at it and we say, okay, maybe there is another way to do the same thing. We look again and we find another way. So it's not because we did a bad job the first time, it's just because we took decision going forward, and when we are at the end of the day, we can optimize or change a couple of things.
So what spurs you to look at it again? What was the decision that made you re-examine your original solution?
Well, most of the time it's always, when we work with clients, most of the time it's budget constraints, right? Yeah. I mean, and sometimes, it's just to make sure, the client just want to make sure that he's spending his money, he has value for the money he's spending, right? Mm. So at the end of the process, you look at it and you make, even if you have done a fantastic job and the project is perfect, which is very common, obviously. At the same time, looking at this and making sure, even for the client, that he has really value for money, re-examining all the big decisions we have taken on the project, I think brings value overall to this process. So sometimes we do find some very good value engineering that will reduce the cost. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes also there is some little thing that can be improved, for example, for accessibility, for maintenance, and all this kind of stuff that on the project have very little impact in terms of cost, but on the overall duration of the project really brings a lot of value to the project because, you add, for example, a service area in a big expressway, you add a service area, everybody will be able to use it. It has almost no cost. You can, optimize the retail space and everything to make it commercially viable. And at the end of the day, it's a very great service for the people that are going to use the road. So I think there is different things you can do in value engineering. First of all, make sure that you have value for the money you're spending. it comes from the client. Second of all, you can optimize all the parameters together, constructability, budget, schedule, everything is going together. And also, sometimes you find some very nice thing to improve the project with very minimal cost.
So how accurate are your client predictions on the briefing of what you're designing for in the future? So if you're designing a big road interchange, it's based on a certain estimation of the traffic, the development in the area. Does that cause problems? Because it's specific to infrastructure?
It's a very good question. I mean, we had many projects in the region where the client starts with very high level of traffic. I mean, we look at this, we say, okay, this is going to be 6 lane by 6 lane, big interchange and everything. And we come back to, to the drawing board, and there is a value engineering that has to be done. Is this development going to arrive? If yes, it's going to arrive. Is it going to arrive that fast that we have to construct everything at the first time? Or can we phase it? And most of the time, working with clients, we can actually phase the development. So the investment, the initial investment is not that, important or large that it was supposed to be initially. And also by predicting on the future, we can make sure this is going to be easy to improve the capacity of the interchange, for example, or the road. If we don't think about it right now, it might be very difficult in 20 years to actually improve the capacity of these facilities.
In one short sentence, what is the biggest challenge you've faced in infrastructure design?
Okay, if you talk about myself, as a design team, I mean, it's often like challenging our own engineers, Our engineers are very good. They are very smart. I'm an engineer. We're all very smart. But I mean, sometimes we really have to push people to go beyond their comfort zone and find solution that is not their first solution, I mean, there is somebody, I think, in the previous panel talked about ego, and it's something we really face because engineer is very proud of his work, and we have to really challenge him and making sure there is no other way to do this.
Okay. We'll move on now. I'll ask Mohammed Khan to just give his experience on value engineering, at what time it should be implemented, who should be involved, and who do you think should lead it?
Thank you.
And also experiences from projects you've done. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, this is a very important and very practical question. And I would like to take the first part of the question. What is my experience on this? Basically, what I understand, even from the previous session and the sessions going on, different perspective of the value engineering. What I learned from my training, my certification from SEWA International, that value engineering is not about cutting cost, quality, or just another quality tool or another constructability review. These are not the things. Value engineering, to my perspective, is a systematic process to be undertaken on a project during different stages in a sequential activity manner through a workshop. At the end of the workshop, whether you come up with a saving or you don't come with the saving, doesn't matter, but usually you come up with the saving because the process is so structured, so uniformly applied. If I give you an example of Federation Highway Agency or even Abu Dhabi Municipality, so if I give you the FHWA example, they have conducted around 1,000 studies over a period of 2012 to 2016, 5 years. Out of 1,000 studies, they came up to save $50 million, which is on around 100 billion worth of the project, which results around 5% saving. So when you do a structured value engineering, you can save around 5 to 10%. Abu Dhabi Municipality has implemented value engineering also for last 4 years, but as a conventional approach, not as a structured approach. And we also came up with a cost reduction and saving around 15 to 30%. We have some examples I can share with you later in the discussion. Now come back to your second question. What is the right time to apply? There is nothing specified in terms of the structured process when to apply. Value engineering can be applied any point, any stage or phase of a project life cycle, provided you feel that there is enough potential for cost saving or added value to justify your cost of the value study and the time and effort you invested. I'll give you one theoretical example for that, like why we should do, how our value engineering should be applied as early as possible, as we already discussed this subject in the previous discussion. Why the value engineering should be applied early? Because by definition of value equation, which is called function over cost. So the objective of the value study is to increase the function of a project and reduce the cost, while performance, quality, and safety needs are unchanged. This is the fundamental of that. So you can change the function and the cost early in the project because it will have less impact on the project delivery schedule. The changes are easily accepted by the client, so the damages or the problems are much lesser. So it should be applied as early as possible. And also, there are greater potential for change, and change costs less to implement at early stages. The cost savings is higher, but if the early opportunities are missed, you can still apply value engineering any point, construction phase or even the final design phase or earlier. But studies has shown the ability to influence the value for money reduces with the project time. As the project increases, the cost saving reduces. So from that perspective, the best way to apply value engineering is at a concept level. And when we prepare, Abu Dhabi municipality prepared a specific guideline on that subject. It details all the things, when to do and how to do and all these things. Although the guidelines are not yet published because it is under currently review with QCC and it's not publicly open, available. Now I'm coming to the second part of your question. Who should lead the value engineering and what are the team look likes? Basically, value engineering is undertaken in a workshop, which is typically 3 to 5 days, depending on the size of the scale of the project, by a experienced professional who is leading the workshop and who is a CVS certified value specialist. It is the highest certification in this line. The team leader has a responsibility to lead the team and make sure the structured process which has been invented or discovered by SEWA International has been followed throughout the process. And then the value engineering team, which also a group of people or participants who are a multidisciplinary team and they have expertise in their disciplines, they should be involved in conducting the value engineering. One thing is important here, the team preferably or ideally be independent of the design team. Because if the design people involve the same thing, you will get the same results. But value engineering is a different process. You sit in a closed room, in a workshop, 5 to 10 people, do the sequential activities in 3 stages and 6 phases, which is called information, functional analysis, creative phase, development phase, like that. And then you come up with the results and you show your results to your project manager or the client. Okay, this is the outcome of the value study, or these are the recommendations. Recommendations may be accepted, may not be accepted. Usually they are accepted and results in adding value and saving cost. So, but Abu Dhabi municipality, when they prepare this criteria for selecting the value engineering team and the team leader, they did not put this requirement that the team leader should be a CVS, because this is a high requirement. Not many CVS available here in this region actually. It's a tough process to obtain those certifications. So they say that even if you are AVS, Associate Value Specialist, or VMA, Value Management Associate, you can still lead the team provided you have done 3 value engineering studies. And other than that, there are other qualities which the team member should have, as interpersonal skills, decision making, teamwork to achieve a common objective. So to sum up the whole question, value engineering should be undertaken any point in a project life cycle, but better if it can be taken as early as possible by a multidisciplinary team and led by a team leader who is CVS certified to maximize the value of a project.
Okay, it's interesting. I never knew there was specialists in value engineering to lead the team along the right direction, because most projects, it's either a project manager or a client or somebody involved with the project who is looking inwards rather than outwards. So it seems a good idea. I don't know if anybody else has had experience with value engineering management on projects in the panel that can add anything. Anybody? No? Okay. We'll move on to Chris. Chris, again, part of the process, and Mohammed has answered some of it. When should it be starting a project? Should it be continuous or at stages? And who should be involved? Should it look purely at capital costs, or where are the benefits in infrastructure in looking at operating costs? And what's your experience from projects you've been involved in? Are clients willing to pay more and see value at the end of the project?
Yeah, that's a difficult. Are clients willing to pay more? I think for infrastructure, value engineering means something different, or slightly, you've got to approach it slightly in a different way too, especially things like MEP and buildings. You know, for infrastructure, as a minimum, you're looking at 25 to 30 years life. You know, for things like bridges, you can be looking up to 120 years life. So the OPEX of these structures and this infrastructure, can far outweigh the actual front-end capex, especially where things like sewage treatment, where you're using chemicals and things like that. So I think value engineering for infrastructure should very much focus on the whole life cycle costs, right to the end, even down to the demolition and eventual replacement of the asset. And I can actually give a couple of good examples of this in that back in the 90s, I was working in the UK, and we had a thing called the Urban Wastewater Directive, which meant that a lot of sewage treatment plants had to be built in a very short period of time. And I actually got to see plants built under different procurement techniques. So these are effectively the same size of plant, built under the same general specifications, but just built under completely different procurement routes. If you looked at a plant that was procured under something like a boot scheme, where the contractor not only had to pay the cost of the construction, but he then had a concession for 25 years to maintain that plant up to a set standard. And at the end of 25 years, he had to leave the plant in a reasonable standard as well. And then you compared that to a plant that had been built purely under the traditional designer, contractor, sort of red book type arrangement. The plant that the client ended up with was completely different. The contractors would invest in things that reduced things like the use of chlorine, reduce of polymers. They would actively go for more expensive capex. In fact, quite a lot of these plants were costing 20% more from a capex perspective than the ones that were procured under the same specifications than those. So what you were seeing is that with the traditional route, you used to get the minimum standard. The contractor obviously he's had to tender and win this in competition. So he's not adding anything in that's above the specification. Whereas a contractor that then has to think about the 25-year procurement, 25 years of operation, is going well above and beyond that, because he knows that a marginal increase in capex can save him significant amounts of money for the next 25 years. So that's an example from back in the 90s. Just a more simple example I could give is recently I was working for a operation and maintenance contractor, and we just won a new project which needed around 300 staff, and we needed to buy around 90 vehicles, 90 pickup trucks. And we was going down the route of buying these, have you seen these Chinese Go Now vehicles? It's a pickup, it does exactly the same job. And we looked at that and we said, well, how are we actually going to get the best value? You know, these things were around 45,000 dirhams each. And we looked at these against Toyota, which were just over 75,000 dirhams each. Now, on a pure cost basis, a pure capex cost, you're always going to buy the Go Now, because when you look on a spreadsheet, the saving is massive. You know, it's 30% saving that you're having to outlay. But when we started to look into the actual operation costs, the running costs and the residual value of those vehicles after 5 years, it actually turned itself completely on its head. The Go Now vehicles would require a lot more maintenance, and that maintenance wasn't included. Whereas with the Toyota, you had a 5-year, 250,000 kilometer warranty. And at the end of those 5 years, when your vehicles, we'd estimated that they'd do around 150 to 200,000 kilometers in that time, the Go Now vehicles would be completely shot. We would be lucky to have got them to the 5-year mark, and then they'd be worthless. We'd scrap them, scrap value. Whereas the Toyotas, we could actually sell, you know, to replenish, and we would get back a reasonable amount. So I mean, that's just a very basic example of where VE, you know, especially for infrastructure, can actually increase the capital cost, because you're looking at a 25, 50, 100-year saving, and especially for government and government organisations who are going to be around, and they're going to be the owners of these assets. You know, I definitely think that that value engineering, you know, when looking at the whole life cycle cost, can actually increase your capex. In fact, it should increase your capex, because you should be going for that quality and looking at those 25, those 50 years' time.
Is there any difference between the approach from governments or private bodies in infrastructure you found?
Yeah, I think from a private perspective, obviously, you know, where you've got developers building infrastructure that they want to hand over, you know, value for them is obviously making sure that you hand over the absolute minimum cost, you know, to the government. So again, you know, from a designer's perspective, we're designing to meet the minimum standards, get that NOC ticked. So from their perspective, it's a very much different process, and that goes throughout. You know, if you've got a contractor that's won a contract in competitive tender against the specification, when they sit down to do value engineering, they're looking at maximising their profits against delivering the specification. You know, it's not in their interests in a standard contract to actually look after the client's interests. They've won it. They've now got to deliver it. So you get this very much, you know, with a procurement method like that, you get this very much, adversarial contract, where the contractor is always trying to provide the absolute minimum under the specification, and the client and the consultant are trying to push them to deliver more. So again, you don't end up with best value. So value engineering definitely is something that changes depending on the party that is actually carrying out.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Paquito.
Yes.
With so many ways of communicating nowadays, the internet, BIM as a process to help us, we still seem to see the same mistakes being made in the construction industry. Have you come across examples of where mistakes are repeated, examples of how they can be overcome? What is your own experience in value engineering in infrastructure?
Okay, so what I'm going, thank you very much. What I'm going to share with you is how we do it in SEWA way. Since Dr. Rashid has been appointed to become the chairman of the organization, the first thing that he had done from that time was to create the SEWA 15 principles, and you may be able to see them in the big projects publication that you have in front of you guys. You can look into it. And number one on the principle is smile. So let's make a lighter mood here. Communication. Why? Communication really is something that is I would say, unpredictable. It's just like what other people use in their Facebook status, simply complicated. and really it tells about itself why it keeps on happening, why the same failure keeps on happening. Because at times, when the client spells out what do they need in terms of value engineering, sometimes the designers would make an assumption without repeating it or without confirming it, without getting a clarification. Is this really what you want? And also, again, other issue on why it keeps on fail is perceptions. People, thank you very much for the earlier panel, as well as my co-panelists here in their earlier discussion. Again, people's perception about value engineering. When they hear the word value engineering, the first thing that comes into their mind is reducing cost, which Mohammed have said a while ago, it's not. So again, it's about improving, okay, the functionality compared to the cost. It could be that it could be that you can have the same cost for a particular equipment, but you have a better functionality. It could be integrable with the new system. It could be more smart. And what had happened earlier in some organization, or in my experience, is that the initial planning is very important as well. And as Mohammed have also said, I agree with him that value engineering can be implemented any point in time, not only during the design stage, not only the execution, but even including in the operations and maintenance. Considering our organization as providing utility services in water, electricity, and gas, we have to understand that what we are looking at here is the importance of the equipments that we need. And to avoid repeating the problem in terms of having a failure in selecting equipments at times, is that through the initiative of our chairman, we are collaborating. What we have done is we identified where we are right now, what is the demand that we need in the future, and we have a timeline. And we partnered with the leading and renowned engineering teams here to help us in creating our master plan 2030. And with that also, along with the studies that we have asked them to deliver to us, is to consider, among the gaps that we have, to identify what are the top priorities, what are those part of the project that we can carry out right now that could support the long-term plan, so that there is a sustainability and there is a continuity in terms of building up and improving our system and our activities. Because we, in electricity and water, we deal with generation, transmission, and distribution. And it's all about speaking on providing services to the general public. In Sharjah, we are catering that to about 1.5 million in a 24/7 basis. So it's really a tough thing to do. And when we look into this, we are not just, we also partnered with the leading brands that are now known to be reliable and efficient. Because we are not only looking at now at the cost. Usually, most of the organization, one of the issues that makes them resist on the value engineering, or why it fails, is that, again, cost, the immediate cost. They are looking at the immediate cost involved in implementing, for example, okay, part of value engineering is improving the functionality, selecting a better quality or a better equipment, and to that there is an additional cost. It would be a higher cost. And the resistance is that, okay, why should I spend it now? But the way we are looking at is we always consider the life cycle. And do we get back that And to that basis, we are considering the best quality that are available, that are reliable, that are efficient. And this helps us improve in terms of providing a better service to the general public.
Have you introduced anything specifically in your procurement and design process to address getting the best value?
Yes, basically in our procurement process, we made sure now that the equipments to be used are star-rated equipments, the latest and available equipments and materials in the market, rather than just looking at the cheapest or the most economical. Well, as a designer, we should always look at the best material or equipment available in the market with the cheapest cost or lowest cost, not the cheapest. And at times also we are not just looking at the cheapest cost or lowest cost on the project, but what can give us more value, okay? Not only to us financially, but to the general public, to the experience they will get, to the service that they will get from us.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. Rob, question for you. In innovation, is it stifled by the nature of infrastructure, or are there innovative ways of dealing with things that you've come across that can actually help provide flexibility, longer life in the way in which you design the infrastructure?
Well, as designers, we have the benefit of policy. And policy, it defines the parameters and gives us a roadmap as to how we should design for the future. But I don't think we should be afraid of unpredictability or predictability to a lesser or greater extent. It's something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis within the industry. For example, climate change is a big one. So we may have a critical system development on a coastal front, and we need to consider, how we mitigate and how we plan for the future for tidal surge. Or more looking into the physical infrastructure and development, we'll need to mitigate and plan for where there could be future expansion. So we need to know how to route our utilities to make sure that we have minimal abortive works in the future. So for me, that's a real area where we can add value in collaborative thinking and pulling the client in towards the design process and understanding the life cycle of the product itself. But just sort of touching on, Chris mentioned a few things about build, operate, transfer type arrangements with infrastructure plant. I think it's very interesting. Plus, as well, we were discussing just before this about how we procure our infrastructure. And for me, when we're talking about value of a project, energy from waste is something that we really should be paying more and more attention to, because fundamentally we're solving two problems. We're taking something that can be an environmental issue and we're turning something into a commodity, which in itself presents value. Now, the value can only genuinely be realized over the full life cycle of a project. But let's not forget we're in a world where we can now generate protein from methane, edible protein. So if we take that and we think about a practical application or a practical example, and let's say there was a mandate to develop an agricultural holding within the region, and let's say we also had existing landfill. Well, if we mesh those two together, and we can look at ways of harnessing methane, which would otherwise be going up into the atmosphere, so we'd be solving one problem whilst generating a resource and a commodity. So we'd be generating edible protein that could be used in the process. So they're really the ways that I like to look at where you can add value, but they can only really be realized if you get early engagement and early procurement in a build, operate, transfer type arrangement. But it's not just that. There's many other technologies, and we utilize many other energy from waste technologies. Incineration, anaerobic digestion, gasification, in-vessel composting. But I think we tend to look at those as projects on their own, rather than integrating energy from waste into a project to benefit a single development. In incineration, for example, I mean, we consider incineration as, you know, these big hulking great facilities, but, you know, we can have sort of smaller integrated waste facilities which can take and make fuel cells that can then be taken out into the wider industry to use in like cement firing process and the like. And I think there are really areas where you can add value, but it involves that early engagement and that strategy and collaborative thinking.
When you get involved in a project where you want to introduce these ideas, how available is the information on what waste is generated on the site in surrounding areas that may be useful for other uses that you otherwise would have to bring new material in? Do you struggle to find it, or is it readily available?
It's a very interesting question, and the answer probably is that the waste stream itself and the matrix of the waste stream generally determines the technology that you may want to adopt. So that's generally how you would go about it. So if we know what waste is available, then we can tailor the technology to suit. I mean, for example, the example you gave about the methane to protein, it's a very specific example, but it really highlights the advances that are being made in innovation, value, that truly generate value in infrastructure.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll move on to Majid, who has stepped in at the last minute, as I mentioned earlier, but I understand you're going to give us a small case study example of some roads that you were involved in where you carried out VE. So if you could just explain what you did and how it benefited the projects, Majid.
Yeah, well, before speaking about that specific example, I'd like to address one point, which is that value engineering, yes, it can be implemented at any stage of the project. Nevertheless, the most critical stage is during the execution. That is based, as he mentioned earlier, it is more dependent on the type of the contract you're having. So in many cases, it's none of the contractor's interest to implement value engineering, where he can meet the minimum specifications. So now moving forwards to more performance-based contracts, you are not focusing anymore on a certain approach or a certain product. You are focusing on key performance indicators that manage the whole project and keeps it open for any value engineering implementation. One example that we faced during the execution of Kalba Ring Road that connects Fujairah to whoever's moving from Dubai to Fujairah. During the second phase of the construction of that highway, we faced an issue that it came during the summertime, and you have in that period more restrictions during the working hours for the operators on site. Yeah. And then at that stage, we've decided to integrate automated machinery with all the graders, dozers, all the machinery based on site. And with that, we basically, what happens is that you have at your traditional stage, you have a certain operator with the machinery with several surveyors around him taking points and making sure he's following out the correct measurements. With the updated procedure, you have important data into the machinery, and you can see all the graders on site almost hitting the third gear and finishing the work on time. And we faced amazing results with that integration of around 35% reduction in time for the completion of that stage. So yeah,
so was that implemented in advance or when you realized you had a problem?
Well, no, it wasn't at an earlier stage prepared for. It was implemented during the execution of the project. Okay. And this brings us to the earlier point I mentioned, which is value engineering is, of course, as a function or a ratio of performance to cost. But before that, it also depends on the professional relationship between the client and the contractor, as well as the contract you are having in the first place. And but by that time, once you have managed that procedure, you'll be able to implement value engineering in the best case. And another small example is at the stage of tendering for one of the street lighting projects. Before that, it was prepared to be done as an LED retrofitting. Then the contract and the tenders was changed into just energy reduction. And I've seen that most of the submittals were only focusing on LEDs, and they were focusing on certain products. But the point is now to stick to one criteria and to stick to certain performance to be expected by the contractor to be implemented. And with that in mind, you'll give more space to the implementation of value engineering.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. I'm not sure how we're going for time, but if we could open up to questions from the audience, if anybody's got anything they'd like to ask any of the panel, if you'd like to stand up and give your name and state who you'd like to answer the question. Any questions?
Yep, got one there.
Hi, Hazard. My name is Peter. I work for AST, a little marine contractor in town. So I'd like to reiterate what's been said again and again, is that in order for VE to take place, there needs to be a solid circle of trust between the employer, the engineer, and the contractor. From a contractor's perspective, we usually begin our VE after the contract award. And what I would note is that VE is not free. It costs. And from a contractor's perspective, it costs us money and it costs us time, which is usually, we can't recover that from the client, which is, but when we get to who is the benefactor of that VE, usually the client wants a piece of the action, but hasn't paid for any of it, which is an interesting one. A question that I would like to put to the panel is, where does conventional good engineering stop and VE start? For instance, a project that Chris and I are involved in at the moment, there's an instance where we had to design pavement. Now, in the tender design, there was 100 mil paver and a certain thickness of subgrade. During the design, AECOM managed to engineer it in such a way that in certain areas we could reduce the pavement thickness and reduce the layers, and in other areas we had to increase the thickness of the sub-base. The net result was a saving, but in my mind that was design development, and in the client's eyes that was value engineering. But where is the line?
I would like to answer that one.
Can I comment on that? Yeah. Actually, this is a very interesting question and very important question as well. And everybody is really looking for what is the practical applicability. That's why in my discussion I mentioned that value engineering can be applied any point of time in a project life cycle. Design is very good if you apply and save and then do alternative methods and techniques and all. But let's talk about construction. In construction, value engineering you can apply, and it is the terminology is used is VECP. The value engineering change proposal. So the idea there is a contractor propose alternative options because they have new machines, new materials, new techniques, experience. They come up with, let us say, 20% cost reduction or 10% cost reduction. And then they share the money with the client. So it is a win-win situation. This is one scenario. Other scenario, if the value engineering is done during the design phases, so it is done through the technical workshops. In the workshop, the client is there, consultant is there, technical experts there, even sometimes contractor is also there. So in a closed room, without any prejudice or personal interest, all work towards problem solving and saving money through innovative and creative ways. Because this is the way the structured approach goes into phases. Information phase, when you collect information, function, you study each function, what project elements they do. and then you see how else this function can be achieved. That's the whole idea basically. And then in the creative phase, which is the third day possibly or fourth day in the workshop, then you come up alternative solution, and while all sitting on the same room and they are all agreeing to the option. So at the end of the day or at the end of the workshop, you realize agreed recommendation where there is a consensus among all. Practically, sometimes it may not possible, but when you lay your contract in such a way, then things can be covered.
I'd just add to that a little bit in that I think that needs to change. Sorry, this is coming off. We need to change the way in which we procure projects for that to happen, or you have to have contractors who are willing to provide some of their time and expertise free of charge, which they shouldn't have to do. So the contractor should be paid for giving that practical input at an early stage, or become part of the team that's going to see the project all the way through.
Just one other thing I would like to bring up, especially for sort of government agencies that invest in roads and bridges, is one thing that I think should be brought into the equation is also the cost of downtime on the economy. You know, if you're building a bridge and you build it with cheap materials, that means that in 20 years it's going to have to either undergo serious maintenance or complete replacement. You know, the cost to the economy is not just the cost of replacing the bridge. The cost is in all the delays, all the diversions, all of that time which is wasted by, you know, thousands and thousands of people has a cost. You know, people take longer to get to their business meetings or whatever. A good example I've got of this is, you know, Dubai Mall, fantastic mall. I don't go there because I just can't abide the 30 minutes it takes me to get in, and then the 30 minutes it takes me, if I'm lucky, to get back out again. You know, we've just had a client recently where we did a VE on his access for his new mall, and we more than tripled the cost of the roads and bridges that were going to his mall, just because of things like that. So that when his mall is constructed, when it's finished, he's actually going to be able to get people in very quickly, very easily, and get them out very quickly and very easily. And I know that me and a lot of other people would rather go to a mall where we can drive straight in, pick which level of the parking that we want to actually enter in, nearest to the shops that we want to actually go to, spend our money, and then leave in a quick manner. That again is another example of where VE actually increased the capital cost for the longer term benefits.
And it would have made the project more successful. But
hopefully
the issue is convincing the client, isn't it?
They're building it now, so they're spending the money on the roads and the bridges to get in. So for this, just to give you some detail, for this mall, originally it was all grade level access with one underpass. We've ended up putting 2 kilometres of bridge around the mall to give access to different levels of the parking. And I mean, 2 kilometres of road bridge is not a small undertaking in capital cost.
So what got cut to pay for that?
Yeah, that's always the issue. But hopefully, I mean, from a financial perspective, the client will get that money back. In that people will be able to pay a premium for the real estate within his mall, because he's getting a lot more footfall through the mall, because people will pop in for quicker visits. It doesn't have to be you don't have to go for 4 hours. Or 5 hours just to get the value of driving in and driving out. You know, you can just pop in for 20 minutes because you know that you're going to be able to get out again quickly.
That's a great example, Chris.
Thanks.
Great example. Any more questions?
I think we're just running out of time. So.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Okay, I'd like to thank the panelists very much for sparing the time and giving us the benefit of their experience. I mean, it is very clear that value engineering can be done, and you can get value out of a project even if you have to spend more money. We do have to change, I think, the process in which we procure projects to get the full benefits. But if you'd like to just share your thanks to the panelists with myself for coming here. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back everyone. Can I ask you please to be seated if you don't mind? I hope the coffee was good enough, still warm. No, not really. Did you pay the bill before you finish? Not yet. Okay, well, before we move into the next session, can I just remind you, please, I forgot to mention that early in the morning, there is a form on the back of the booklet. It has basically some feedback. It is valuable, and I promise you that Gavin and the rest of the team, they actually do read it and go through it. So please don't forget to provide your feedback and pass it along before you head out. And now, just talking about technology. We've mentioned this early in the morning, and we understand that technology is a key tool in moving forward into delivering the quality that we're looking for. So how about technology and value engineering, and how much they are linked and how much they are related? So I'll leave you in safe hands with my dear colleague, David. Please join us to the stage.
Okay, great. Could I please welcome our panelists onto the stage and show your gratitude for them taking the time, please? First and foremost, Kamal Farah and Shahil, Fady, Hiba, and Paul. Hi guys. Now, so technology and value engineering. We've got an entire life cycle of building, whatever asset class that happens to be, from design through to the operation and asset management. Where, in your experiences, do you most see the value being created for the implementation of technology, be that software or hardware, through the entire life cycle of a project? We'll start on the wrong end. We'll start with Paul. If you'd like to offer your view on the matter.
Oh, thank you. So, I mean, Trimble, just talking about what we provide in the industry, you know, we provide innovative solutions for the whole construction continuum. So it's hardware, positioning devices, integrated software solutions, collaboration platforms. So we're exposed across the spectrum in terms of where people are using our technology. Our motto is transforming the way the world works, and really what we're there to do is add value in terms of our solutions to the construction. Essentially what we're looking to do is transform the way we work in the construction industry, because we're a highly inefficient business, and you know that's one of the key drivers in the industry is how we can improve our efficiencies and reduce our cost. So, in terms of the different stakeholders that will be using our solutions, it can be from the very beginning, where we have people using it on infrastructure, or using it at the very start, where they're mapping out the master plans. Through to engineering, so using our different software applications to look at different types of scenarios of design with multi-materials, deploying that, and the biggest cost obviously is in the execution phase on any project. So that's where the cost of materials comes in, the cost of labor. Engineering only forms a very minor percentage of the cost. So how can we get that information to the site, and how can we actually manufacture whatever that project is in the most efficient manner? So we have companies that will use it in various phases. They'll try and automate their processes, and then deploy a mixture of both hardware and software so we can get the information efficiently from the office through to the site, and then communicate back to the office on any changes that come up. So it's really every avenue of construction that we see the impact, and we're just here to try and make things better for the industry.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And Hibber, in your experience, where the value engineering technology side of things, and through the entire life cycle of a development from beginning to operations and maintenance, where's the value that you see being added in your world?
So I'm actually a structural designer, but I have done some work in the Internet of Things, so in instrumenting structures with sensors and then trying to gather as much information as possible about the structure. So I see it as adding value in terms of adding knowledge that we know. As much as people think that with all these structures that we're building, we're going higher and higher and bigger, that we know everything about structures, we definitely do not. And so I see it as aiding in multiple aspects. First of all, for the designer himself, it's a good way to validate your design. As a developer, a lot of the time, as a developer or an owner, you get changes in the design that weren't anticipated. And so a lot of the time, there's a lot of abortive works that happen on site because we don't know much about what's happening except what we have designed. So if we're changing the design, we are forced to go and change what's being constructed on site. But if we have information that is coming from the site in real time, we are able to avoid a lot of that, because sometimes as an engineer, as a designer, you have the sense that, no, you can't put more load on your structure, but you don't have any evidence to prove it. So that sense on its own is not enough. And that also goes back to authorities that are liable here, and they have to sign off on your design. If they can have more concrete information about the design that you have, about the loading that you have on your structure, they are much more comfortable signing off on it than just going based on the way design has been done for the past 50 years. We do have better materials now, but we just need to prove it on site. And overall, that carries over, so that's during the construction phase, if there are any changes, and to validate your design, but that carries over into the long term. So when we have maintenance, a lot of the time on infrastructure elements, particularly bridges, we just have scheduled maintenance. So every 5 years, you go out on the bridge and you change this and you change that, and it's supposed to function better. But if we have better information, and if we can prevent those issues before they arise, or maybe that maintenance is not actually required every 5 years. So if we have better information, we can schedule our maintenance in a way that reduces the cost of maintenance, and that justifies the cost of putting these sensors in the first place.
Okay, absolutely. And Fady, in your experience?
Well, yeah, I can add to what my panelists just said. It's all about a cycle. So when we look at a construction project, it's a cycle that starts by a design, and it has to go through all the way to finishing the project. So what the industry is facing, some discontinuity and lack of sharing of information. This is why we need things like the Internet of Things and the sensor to feed back this data. Yes, a designer might design something which can be applicable or not. He doesn't know what actually happens on site. So that technology communication flow to reach back what happened will help enhancing. And when you collaborate all the stakeholders, all the departments, all the way into every phase of the project, you can actually enhance what's been going on. This is why when we look at the industry, value engineering, and technology, we look mainly about sharing information and accountable information.
And how do you see getting that buy-in? Because here, as sort of Paul mentioned earlier, the level of inefficiency and we kind of, and as Hibber mentioned, we're just doing it the way we do for 50 years. There is an intrinsic tunnel a little bit with that. And that's a challenge, would you?
It is a challenge. I mean, we see it every day that people are resistant to change. We have to change that mindset. The fact that we are doing something over and over for the past years doesn't mean we're doing it right.
Of course.
Or it doesn't mean it can be right, but doesn't mean this is the best solution. So we can have more enhanced, less costly, but beneficial solutions. This is why collaboration and communication is the essence of.
Okay. And so how, in your experience in the life cycle, what's technology doing that's driving a better process, as it were?
I think, let me just break it down a little bit. One is the project life cycle. If you see how we incur the cost on a project life cycle, is 20% is basically around the design and the construction, and the rest of the 80% is post the handover through the life cycle of it. But this 20% is so critical that it will have an impact on this 80%. So it becomes more important that we bring in all the value engineering possibilities here. Now, that's one side of the story. The second side of the story is resistance to the change. We all understand we want to do this value engineering. There is a lot of technology out there you can leverage today. The question always arises that my team is resistant, I don't have a proof, how do I know this is going to work? It's not what people are used to approving or reviewing. So we have been always questioning the evidence of these technologies and the possibilities it brought in, whether they were sensors or the big data or the cloud. Now with emerging role of artificial intelligence, I believe it's going to change, because for the first time in the history of these 60, 70 years of construction processes being documented, we have been building since the day we came on this planet. For these 70 years, we have built a lot. It was not that BIM was not there, we couldn't build the Leaning Tower of Pisa or Taj Mahal in India. All of these things have been built in past without all of these things, what we call technology. But that time also there was a technology. So artificial intelligence is going to play a key role, along with the cloud computing and robotics, to bring in the new ways of value engineering. Let me give you a few examples. If I'm able to really document the behavior of all the existing structures in UAE, how they have been behaving since last 3-5 years, and how they will be behaving in the next 5 years, I'm able to predict using artificial intelligence. That's going to build confidence for the designers like Hiba, who is going to say, okay, this is how the buildings have behaved. I captured this data, and now I'm simulating this. Now what artificial intelligence is going to do is, as a human being, I can simulate 1, 2, 3, 5, or 20 scenarios based on my experience and exposure. But imagine my co-partner, computer, AI, is able to simulate 100,000 options for me. And now I have a choice to prioritize. Out of these 100,000 options, I care about sustainability. That should be the priority 1. I care about my client's cost. That's my priority 2. Can I reduce the time of handover? That's my priority 3. The AI will bring this down to probably 100 or 50 options. So that's the new emerging role of technology, I believe, is going to come out and change the way we have been doing value engineering in the past.
Okay. And Kamal, in your experience, where's technology been of good utilization, or in your experience, where has it been best implemented? Because I know you're coming at it from a fit-out perspective, and where do you see the future with it?
Right, so if I may, I'll introduce myself. My name is Kamal Farah. I'm the CEO of Avanos. We're one of the largest fit-out and joinery companies in the UAE and the Middle East. We operate out of 21,000 square meters of facilities in Dubai, and we're constantly upgrading ourselves in terms of machines and software. Now, from where I'm sitting, I see a word revolution here, industry revolution. It's not industry revolution, it's industry evolution. One of the speakers earlier, he said, we're always talking about the same thing. We are always talking about the same thing, but that's a good thing. That means that we're evolving. With the technology that we have today, and what we are trying to do, especially in our company, is to capture data, use that data, and analyze that data. That's what we do as engineers. We capture data, we use that data, and we analyze that data, and then we evolve from there. With the technology that we have today, it's much easier to access that data much quicker, as you've heard from Hiba. From an engineering point of view, a structural engineering point of view, I studied structural engineering, you can get that data much quicker. You can act faster. From a construction point of view, you reduce the costs because there is less wastage in terms of time, in terms of material, and you're able to act much quicker. It helps us in a big way. And we continuously use this information to see how to continuously evolve.
Okay, and when you're gathering all of this information, you're implementing all of this new technology. I mean, what's your process in sort of selecting that? Because there is a whole new raft of worlds of different types of technology that's at different stages of development. How do you go, in terms of running your business, from a business question, it's interesting because you're an implementer of some of the ideas that we've heard. How do you go around assessing what all of that noise is going to do to help your business drive forward?
You know, it's a very interesting question because, as you said, I'm the only one on this panel who's not an technology, who's not a provider of technology. I'm an implementer of technology, but there are so many different technologies out there. There's so many different software out there. You have software we utilize software for planning, for estimation, for especially, you know, because we're a specialized contractor in joinery. So we have a specialist software for creating cutting lists. There are a couple out there, and you have to weigh the pros and cons because some of them come from the machine providers, some of them come from an independent party. And we use all this technology, and the thing is you've got to see how to collaborate this technology. You have different technology for different processes. As I said, you know, planning, costing, cost control, cutting lists, you know, software, all these special. You have to see how to put them together. That's where the secret is.
Yep.
But there is a lot out there, and it depends what you want to use it for.
Okay, and I mean, with that, I mean, a sort of question throw out quickly, really sort of Paul's direction is, how do you help people justify these investments as a software implementer? So the software boys here, please, because I can tell you, I've had arguments already in my new role about return on investment and capital cost of investment, etc. How do you go around this demonstrating? Because I get very excited about the AI and the Internet of Things right now, but it's an investment, and I've seen a lot of. We're evolving. Can you explain how? Because we've had this argument before.
Lots of discussion. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's, you know, our job as innovators of these solutions is to, you know, justify and get the interest of our audience that we're talking to. I think that, you know, primarily looking at the customer base and the people that you're talking to is, you know, that they're looking for a return on investment, you know, first and foremost. Obviously, price is always something that comes into it. And what we need to leverage is, you know, not just focus on the initial investment, but, you know, why do you want the technology in the first place? What's the usage that you're going to apply with that technology? How can you what's the betterment for the project itself? You know, who's driving that decision? You know, if we look at a lot of tenders that kind of come out nowadays, they're quoting high level of development, and, you know, they're looking for projects that can have usability going into the future. So we're looking at FM as well. So at the outset, a lot comes down to, you know, the project that you've got, what level of information you need to embellish into that project, the metadata, you know, the usage for that data in the future. So that's going to be firstly, it's going to be what's the case use of the particular software that you're looking at. Efficiency, we develop software and hardware explicitly for efficiency in the food chain, let's say. So, you know, when we develop software, we don't just go and develop it for one use. You know, we're really selling that to the company so they can be more efficient. Otherwise, there's no value in them investing. So when we look at the traditional processes, and I've been in the industry a few years. I started out many years ago in a traditional role, you know, 30 years back. And how technology has changed over the course of that period is amazing. But you know, quite often people lose sight because everything has advanced so far nowadays that we're kind of trying to make processes that little bit more faster and faster. So, you know, one solution compared to the other may develop the same level of efficiency nowadays in how we produce a design. Yeah. You know, we're talking about maybe minutes of difference in technology, but the process is really one key element. You can buy lots of different softwares, but if they are not interconnected, then you don't have a process. You're working in silos. So the other aspect is openness in terms of our technologies, and the collaboration side is a key to that as well. Once you go from that, the philosophy of digitization, and you end up having to go back into, printing out a drawing and then taking that out on site, you've lost that efficiency. You've thrown in more potential for errors and more potential for delays. So softwares that can maintain throughout the life cycle in a digital format is something that we're trying to sell to the customer. It may be more costly, but for the life cycle of that project and the life cycle of your process, it's going to be much more efficient as you go on and save you much more money overall. So hopefully that kind of answered it in...
Yeah, absolutely. Have you two gents got...
So, okay, go ahead. Go ahead. It's all right. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that if we look to the construction industry, it's the most complicated among all other industries. And yes, there are a lot of softwares out there, but construction doesn't follow a logic like banking system or retails, etc. It has a lot of what if else connection, and it's a collaboration between departments such as design. We're talking about people on site. We're talking logistics, accounting. So different departments talking on different languages. And that, when we look at software, we don't look at software that can fit to a specific department. We have to look to collaboration tools where we can combine every stakeholder, every active person on a site, so to share the information as we spoke earlier.
If I may add, you asked me the question earlier, what do I look for when choosing a software? Is the openness of the software. How easy is it to integrate that software with our in-house ERP systems and the software that we develop in-house, because we do develop our own software in-house. And it's very important from a management point of view to make sure that the software that we buy is open enough that we can integrate it with the different softwares that we have in our company, in order for us to be at that forefront in giving the best quality of service and material.
I think, let me just start from what Kamal said. In good old days, you could get a demo done for the customer and they would say, okay, now software cost is not easy, it's an investment. And people have to choose it and invest wisely. So what we have been doing in Autodesk in the last good number of years, like I think 5-7 years, we have been building something called Technology Innovation Centers. We have got one in Birmingham, one in San Francisco, another in Boston, where they are really like, in Boston, it's like a construction site. So all our customers walk in there and they get to see how this model from my building information model of the building is going into the CNC machine and getting produced. How this bridge is going to be built in each of these components. Or we did a case study with Airbus where we helped them to do the legs and the partitioning board and reduce the weight by 30 or 45% of the actual weight which is today. And if you really translate that in terms of numbers for any airline, it's a huge multi-million-dollar savings for them. And same is the case we did with one company in Amsterdam who wanted to do a 3D printed bridge, excuse me. And the idea was the design had to come from artificial intelligence and generative design. So they worked with us and we worked with them as the coexisting. It was not about really, here is the software, leave it with it. It was about really proving the value of it because it's new, it's an investment. And we are seeing a huge convergence of the lines blurring between the manufacturing and the construction. And we are not very far from the day when we will see at least a good number of the buildings are being manufactured off-site than built on-site. So we will have to start thinking of how automotive companies over the past 2 decades have been able to become efficient and do value engineering. So those are the processes we have to start inheriting in our construction process.
Okay.
again, if I may add, what you're talking about is the implementation of a lean approach in our industry, in the construction industry, and with your software. We had a lean course recently in the company, and there was a very interesting video that we were shown, and it was of how quickly they changed the Formula One car, the tires in the Formula One cars. And they showed us a sort of video clip from the beginning, from the 1960s till now. It took them 10 minutes in the 1960s. Now it takes them 1 second. And it's through using all these different softwares and integrating them that we're able to become more lean, because we're able to get access to data much quicker. The human mind only thinks, at a certain speed, and we can only access information, at a certain speed. And, we have more in cubby holes, whereas the computer is able to get that information much quicker and act much faster.
So it's basically, do you want data or you want an insight? So in past, we have been looking at more on the data. Now data, because of sensors, because of all these automations and these devices all over the places, the data has become so huge. Sometimes to translate that to a usable piece of information or insight, it is a big investment of time or resources. Now, the question is how quickly you can have the access to that insight or that piece of information which is going to drive that decision.
Can I answer your question?
Sure.
It depends on the hardware that you invest in, because it's also very important to capture that data, and how quickly you can capture that data and how efficient you can capture the data really drives that process, helps you in driving that process. And we are constantly evolving in developing this hardware for capturing that data. It's all out there, but you've got to know what you're looking for and what you want to capture.
So the question is, do we know what we are looking for, or do you want to know what's the kind of investment you are talking about when you want to have this kind of software in place? Is that the question?
No,
okay.
If that's the question, I have the answer. Okay. The answer comes with experience. Now, sorry to talk about ourselves, because I have to give examples. As a company, we've been around for the last over 40 years, and you get the experience of what you're looking for. You know what to look for in the market that you're working in. So from that experience, you know what data you want to capture. So if there's, Heba, for instance, she's talking about capturing structural data from structural elements to see how to design the structure and to maintain the structure, which is very important in the lifestyle structure.
That's actually quite a good point. So we speak a lot about construction. We're talking about life cycle, because there's been such a zoned in focus on the cost of something to actually build it. And because you're in the design, are you starting to see the life cycle sort of conversation coming in and the implementation of technology for life cycle? Because people historically haven't paid any attention particularly to the 70-80% cost of the actual life of the project. You mentioned that authorities were starting to feel more comfortable because of the utilisation of this hardware, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the clients are necessarily implementing it. In your experience, have you started to see that coming through?
So actually, just to give you a background, I lived in the US for 5 years, and I worked there on the maintenance of bridges, and that's where we started this research on sensors and all that. And there's more attention to this because a lot of their bridges are deficient. A lot of these bridges were built in the 50s and 60s and now need to be maintained, and some of them, they're worried about failing any minute. And so when you come back here, everything is still new and you forget about these issues. You think if you build it right, it should be fine. And so there is, I think, to convince people, to go back to your question, to convince people of the cost, these sensors cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and people don't want to pay that money up front. But then I think you can go back to case studies from other places. So maybe we don't have this problem here. But if you just tell them in the future it will be helpful, that is a very broad statement. And people don't want to pay when they don't know what they're getting. But if you give them an example, for example, we have specific case studies that have been published in academic journals and others that actually show the cost of instrumenting a bridge versus the value that you get from that. And over 20 years, for example, you can recover that investment and more. Plus, if you put a price on the failure that could happen, that is also a cost that you're saving, which is harder to measure. So I think we can get our case studies from a lot of different places outside the UAE. For example, in Singapore, there's actually a requirement by the authorities there to instrument any high-rise structures. Okay. And they classify, I think, high-rise there above 20 stories. And so we can learn from that because they've been doing that for 15 years. So we can see what kind of information they've gotten, what kind of technology they've used, and how we can improve on that. And then based on that, we can justify using these things here.
So when we start to look at, we're not particularly great in terms of implementation of new things because we are a very inefficient industry by and large. Do you think there's a mandate that needs to come through to help this along in like the Singapore example that you give? Because sometimes that's the only way to drive this kind of change. We've heard about wonderful early adoption, but it's not necessarily come all the way through. So to justify that, you talk about the authorities being receptive. Do you think it may have to be mandated from that level?
I think so, because I think it could be helpful because, for example, for sustainability, they started requiring a certain percentage of recyclable materials to be used in concrete to try and be more sustainable. Yep. And I think if they hadn't made that requirement, we would be a long way from there. It's very hard to convince the contractors, it's very hard to convince the owners, but if there's a mandate and if it's for the general public good, then I think it could be useful. So I think if we are unsuccessful in approaching the clients themselves, if there's a question of safety, then we can approach the authorities. But I think when it's a question of value engineering, at least in the short term, so if you can prove savings in the construction phase, I think the owners are very receptive. If it's a question of maintenance and things that go beyond what they're looking at right now, I think then we might need intervention from authorities.
And a question I've got for all really is that how we speak about inefficiency within the industry. I mean, we're talking about adoption, and Kamal here is obviously a very keen adopter of new technology. But there is a skills and training gap there. Where are we addressing that in terms of delivering in the value engineering process? Because if you invest in this technology, how do we ensure that it's getting some kind of value out? Because you can justify it by doing a return on investment argument, but there's a gap in terms of knowledge. I can say that across any business I've looked at in general. I mean, how are you? It's probably more a software developer, hardware developer's question, because there are problems with that. You can buy it and it ends up on a shelf, or it doesn't get used again, and that's not return on investment for a technology.
So, yeah, I think one thing as a developer and provider of solutions is that what we are doing and cognizant of the usability is making softwares a lot easier and user friendly. We can have thousands of features in software, but if they're not utilized, then what's the point at the end of the day? So we're looking at developing interfaces almost like apps, and we have apps that work on mobile devices that get used very frequently. If we create something similar to Facebook where you click on that and people are using it every hour. It's interesting to see how many people use those social apps, but develop interfaces that are extremely easy to use, that are very graphical, that have lesser options, because the more options you have, then the more training you require to train the people how to use those. We've got technologies today that we're also talking about language barriers. So we're the vast labor force that we have, in the Middle East. The skill sets we've got to cater to those different skill sets and be able to have solutions that enable them to easily pick up the software. As soon as you get that adoption, then obviously you're changing the process and you're changing the industry. We have examples where we've taken solutions, field link technologies, where we've got hardware, where we're driving a robot, a total station on site that are doing positioning, but the training, there's a language barrier, so non-English speaking country, but the user interface is so easy that by effectively sign language, you can point, say, press this, this, and this, and the person then picks up that technology and is able to go forward with it. So that's really from our vendor side to the industry. Coming up with unique and user-friendly solutions is how we have the biggest impact to adoption and what I would call the stickability of the software into the company.
Okay.
Investment in technology is not just about software and hardware. There is a second investment that we need to do is on our people. So I'll go back to the data and insight example. We need to transform this data into insight. So we need to get the knowledge. And knowledge is not only through systems that are predicting and doing analysis. We need the human interaction. We need the logic that we possess as human and the decision maker. I want to go back to what Kamal was saying previously about in-house implementation and design. This is a tricky part where some people think they are doing innovation by digitizing their own process. So we're transforming paperwork into designing our own software to fit the process. But we're not enhancing the software, we're just digitizing it. And this is what we tried to do over 40 years in CCS. So we designed the knowledge throughout all the customers around the world. So we were taking the knowledge from consultants, from contractors, engineers, etc., to implement an off-the-shelf software that can help you to enhance your process, not just going digital, but going through the proper process of the business. And this is where we work on training the people and getting the information. So this is, just wanted to add on.
So David, back at Autodesk, we look at it a little differently. One is really to make sure that our software is adopted. Another is the responsibility towards the industry. So for the first part of it, we have got a huge network of resellers and academic partners, basically authorized training centers, which we personally spend a lot of time training them so that if a company buys a software, someone is there to help them immediately and help them drive that adoption. I just want to warn everyone that does not mean that that just solves the problem. There has to be a change mindset within the organization and a strategy to do that. But the other part, in the terms of the long term, what Autodesk is very carefully investing in is in our education program. We have a strong education program back at Autodesk where we contribute voluntarily and there's a dedicated team to do that. Which basically does is, first was to make sure all the academia, the teachers and the students and everyone involved in academia does not have to worry about how much is this software going to cost. We gave them access to it. All of our portfolio, they can just use it free as long as they're in academia. Second, we started involving the academia within us and our experts back in Autodesk to build these curriculums. So we have designed curriculums for how to do concept design, how to do sustainability, and all of these kind of things. And we are working with them and giving them access to it. So we might not have the stopgap for everything. This gap is large today. But as you start seeing the new engineers and architects coming out of these institutions, you will see they will have the nag and experience of these softwares. How do they use these new technologies, irrespective of where the vendor and who is providing the software, they will be having this understanding of how do I use this value engineering softwares to drive value during the design or the construction or post handover. Basically, that's how we see it at Autodesk, and that's where we invest in.
Okay, so it's an investment in people. I mean, clearly this is something that you've been doing quite seriously, because you look like quite a forward-thinking technological organisation from where I'm sitting.
we like to continuously educate our people in the software that we buy. Otherwise, we're buying something, as you said, it goes on the shelf. I think it's very important from a managerial point of view that has to go right down through the organisation, which is what we try to do. We try to educate our people on how to use the software that we have bought. And in doing that, we buy them into the process through educating them. And we're finding that it works.
Okay. I can't remember the author of this quote, but I think to really say this, and I personally believe as an employee or as a person who works for a company, there was this quote I read once that said, the CFO was telling the CEO basically, you are going to invest on this person, what if he leaves tomorrow, right? And the CEO says, what if I don't do this and he stays? Right, so I appreciate what Kamal said. This investment is required, not only on the software and the hardware side. I think the most critical part of the investment which companies have to start looking at seriously is investing into the people and enabling them to do this kind of new ways of bringing value.
I completely agree with you, and not throw you under the bus here, but not saying anything bad about you, but there is also something else that we have to take into consideration when we buy the software, which is the help desk that there is behind the software. If ever we have a problem, we need to have someone here that we call, say, well, there's a problem here, we don't know what's going on, and for someone to come to come and to help us. And I think that is becoming more and more, a lot of the software providers realize this, that it's not just something that you buy and you put on the shelf and you tell them, right, go and use it. You need training, you need a help desk, you need a troubleshooter to help you solve all the problems.
And the motivation.
Sorry?
And the motivation.
And
People are not robots. If you're going to tell them just do this and click that, they're not going to be involved. But when you train them and give them that access, they are more motivated because they can see the effect of their work.
I will give you a little insight. There is a problem, especially in this part of the world, in that there are so many different people from so many different countries, and someone will tell you this is a bottle of water. Someone will tell you this is water with water in a bottle. So I've just defined this in two different ways. There are so many different ways of defining things that you find that there's a problem in implementing the software here, and that's where the problem lies. A lot of that. So we have to standardize everything in the software that we buy in order for people to get motivated to use it more and educate them.
Okay. So when we look at adoption today, and we've started to address some of the challenges, and we're looking at technology as it stands. Where do we, as a sort of final discussion points, where do we see the next wave of being able to implement technology for the life cycle of value engineering through design, construction, and indeed asset management, and what's the net benefits to the average layman or layperson in an organisation who's going to have to sort of buy into this and implement it? So anyone want to take the thoughts as to what's next and what the benefits are likely to be for the whole process? Because we've got software, we've got some hardware, we've got a life cycle, and where do we go from here? There's forward thinking for the final piece, and just see where do we think we're going to be in 2, 3, 4 years' time as we start to look at other modes of implementation in technology. So you mentioned, I'll pick on Sahel a little bit because you mentioned artificial intelligence earlier. Is that all the next big thing, and is it standalone?
I don't think artificial intelligence is still a distant future. It's now. It's happening. It's just the volume of it. What I foresee now, we have like 9 billion people going to be on the planet very soon. We have cost constraints. We have environmental constraints. I think one big change which is going to happen in the coming years very soon is value engineering is not going to be a standalone topic. It's going to be questioned right from the concept stage. And because of all of these constraints which are going to drive this behavior. Today, it's predominantly driven by budget. And if you go to the history of value engineering, it goes from the World War II when they wanted to substitute things which they were not available without disrupting the end value to the user. But in this case, the same constraints are now going to change this behavior. And that's where I personally believe is going to drive the adoption of these technologies and the need for these technologies, which basically means I need something to do this faster and better because that's my requirement. We have to deliver infrastructure for 9 billion people, but at the same time, we have to be conscious about the environment. We cannot be doing the things we have been doing in the past. These constraints will drive that behavior of requirement of the new ways and new tools. And artificial intelligence, cloud computing, robotics, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be looking them as tools rather than a threat. If I can design faster and efficiently, why not? If someone can execute faster, why not? It is going to disrupt us a lot sooner than we think, They are here, but if we adopt and use them as we want them, they are going to be our biggest friends for humanity in coming forward. This is where I see. So these three things will change the value engineering forever in the construction industry. The artificial intelligence, cloud computing, which is going to translate all this massive data into insights and facilitating every construction professional to make decisions efficiently and faster. And the last is the robots. These robots are going to make things possible for us which were costing us a lot in past because of insurance, security, health, and everything. Because now you can throw in a robot and do some things which you couldn't do impossibly in past. So this is what I believe in.
Okay. Yeah, I'd mirror Sahel's comments there on where things are going in terms of technology and value engineering. We already are seeing that and developing autonomous solutions now. We have in the agricultural industry, and obviously you've lived in the US, but agricultural, very big over there. We have farm machines that will drive and scanning devices that will, from satellite telemetry, will scan the crops to say this crop is ready to reap, this one needs pesticides, and then that information is translated back down digitally into the autonomous machinery that will then go through these fields and reap and sow the fields. This technology is being applied into construction as well. So if we've got areas where you've got dangerous environments to go into, now robots can actually do the work. If we look at in areas where we've got a lot of, if you're doing the construction at the beginning of the phase in terms of the grading, technologies there to take the information and efficiently tell the operator of the machine where he needs to be doing the grading and not moving earth from one place to another, because quite often you'll see when you go to a site they'll dig a pile of sand and then they'll move it to one place, and then later on they'll decide, well, actually I need to use this area, so they'll drive that grading machine and the JCB and they'll go and dig that up and move it to another place. If we look at the inefficiency and also the sustainability, in terms of the long-term future, this is kind of the big drivers that we have in the Middle East. We've got reduce, get more sustainable in over the next few years as a mandate. So there's going to be lots of different aspects. And then on the other technology side, cloud computing is becoming, as I said earlier, it's more app-based nowadays, so it's all in the cloud. And then we've got different applications of information reading technologies, going to site with AR and VR and mixed reality, so that you can have people extract information just by visualizing what's going on site.
Okay. I mean, with that, I've acknowledged we've come to the end of our session. So on that matter, I'd like to thank you all very much. And please, ladies and gentlemen, do show your appreciation to the panel.
But David, just before we close the session, if there are any questions from the stage, if you don't mind. I believe we have one in the back over there.
Thank you very much. My name is Jubair. Again, I'm a colleague of Ismail from Wasl. I just want to make a statement first, and then I'll issue a question. I believe the panel will agree with me that value engineering involves evaluation, optimization, analysis. And in this, it involves data, information, and factuals. And in this, involves unknowns. You cannot have data without unknowns. Now, once you have unknowns, there is a risk. Now, if you agree with me, I would like to ask two questions to the panel. Is integration of risk management and value engineering important? And if yes, how could the risk management softwares be utilized for achieving the best values in the value engineering management?
Thank you. Any takers?
Everybody's looking at me? All right. Yes, I completely agree with you. And the second fold of answer is how do we look at these risk management softwares actually playing the role into this new world. Currently, there's a set of scenarios, if you look at most of the risk management softwares, when they highlight risk, or even the professionals, when they look at it from the experiences, and there's a set of rules which you are able to simulate. What I see in future, this is going to be an evolving thing. The new set of softwares cannot be just what a software team or that particular time the industry was aware of, and it's being written, the hard-coded in. The new set of the softwares which are coming already from most of our camps are going to be evolving, which will be learning from as the new risks were identified based on the material or the behavior or the locations, and it will be learning and evolving as we move forward. What I personally believe is, think of it this scenario. I am worried about yesterday. A few years back, I would be confident enough to tell anyone, do you know what? Why I'm saying this? Because I have this number of years of experience under my belt, and that's what makes me confident to say it or qualified to say it. I don't think we will be able to say that going forward. The next generation of engineers and architects or the professionals who are coming in have got access to all of our experience put together because of all these technologies which are emerging. So that's going to be needing a different set. I cannot tell them because I have 10 years of experience, they are going to say, please shut up. I have 300 years of experience, not only from Middle East, but from China and US and UK. So you just shut up. It's like, I have my notebook and he has a Google. So we have to really buckle up. And they are really our future. They are writing our future. And they have access to all this inside. So your risk management software is not going to look same what it looks today. It has to be evolving and it has to be learning.
So just building on what you just said, Suhail, and Kamal was talking earlier about evolving rather than changing. Hiba, you've mentioned data collection, having enough information so you can set up your periodic inspections and that kind of thing. As of today, where are we with implementing technology for value engineering?
Well,
Fady, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we are way behind on the invention. I mean, it will be mentioned in the presentation in a bit, but construction industry has less than 1% of revenue spent on technology innovation.
Less than 10%?
Less than 1%.
Than 1%. Why is that?
People are afraid to pay money. They want to finish the project, stay on budget, spend less.
But I heard that we've got plenty of softwares. You guys have been talking about softwares all day long. What happened?
Cheap softwares, maybe. They don't want to invest on a solution. They invest on a particular standalone software. They look at the digits. They look at the end, how much am I going to pay? They don't think on the return of investment. They don't think that software is going to minimize the work that my people are going to do. Therefore, they're going to do more. They only think from the part how much I'm going to pay, and I'm paying salaries, etc. So it's about how much I'm going to lose from my bank account.
I think fundamentally it comes down to the regions that you operate in. So if you look at Europe, which is high expense, high salaries, high cost of living, like the US, they're more willing to invest in technology because they know that technology is going to reduce the cost. So I can reduce my labor force and I can be more efficient.
Yep.
Over here, because the cost of labor is much less, then the cost of investment, innovation becomes much less, and we bid the jobs. You only really see it on the mega projects where they really say this is technology driven and this is where we need to invest the money. And mega malls that are coming up now, we've heard in the earlier panels today, they've invested heavily in technology because there's huge malls where they have to deliver on time. We've got the Expo 2020 coming up. They have to invest in technology because there's a deadline, and that deadline has to be met. So they've got no choice. But for the general construction, investment becomes a secondary factor, and that's where we have to come up with convincing people there's a reason for investing.
Excellent. Sorry, Dave.
No problem. No worries. Any further questions? Oh, we have a question here. So gentleman here.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Sorry, we've got one in the back. Just one second.
Hi, Alleem from AECOM.
Okay.
I'm all for technology, but is the real issue not transparency? It's only as good as information we put in it. Yeah. We're actually going to roll out virtual construction sites, much like Google Street View for construction, so anyone can see what's going on in a project at any one point in time. But it's transparency, yeah? How can we do it? What can we do differently to change people's mentality to make sure we are all transparent? There's no hiding place for anyone. I think that would go a long way to resolve a lot of our issues in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what can we do to basically get the data in? Because as best as I understood it, the data, the reporting, that everything else is only good as the information coming in, and there's a transparency problem that goes with that. So what in terms of technology could we potentially do to improve that? Anybody's got a view on that particularly?
Please go ahead.
Well, I was going to say something on the other side. We cannot be fully transparent. There's safety issues, right? There are a lot of different issues involved here, but if we can expose the vulnerabilities of our structures, that would be catastrophic. And also this data can fall in the wrong hands. It can be translated in the wrong way. You can come out with information. I mean, it's all statistics at the end of the day, and Sohail knows more about that. So I think there is an issue. We do need to balance out how transparent we can be. We cannot just release all of this data for the public to be able to use. And I'm sure you have more to add.
Well, yeah, I was going to look more on the contractual side of how we operate here in the Middle East. So, you know, having lots of conversations with major contractors in the region, you know, one of the discussions I was having was that, you know, we have information, technology in terms of we can have a high level of information already provided. So, you know, wouldn't it be good to have that? And it was more a case of, well, if I put more details in there, I become more liable. So the industry as a whole and how the contracts are written need to be looked at in terms of, you know, are we going to be working, if you look at the US, they work on IPD, Integrated Project Delivery, which is shared risk for everybody. So it's very transparent, and that's really for the benefit of the owner of the project, and everybody's having a shared risk and shared profits. Here it's a bit more contentious.
Adversarial.
Yeah.
Just to add what Paul said, unfortunately when contracts started in the world, they started with the fact or the notion in behind, who do we penalize when there is a fall, right? I think the time has come, we have to start looking at the contracts as how do we reward everyone when we save? That's my thing I can say.
David, if you don't mind, one last question before we close the session.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, they can hear you.
Going back to Fady's point about the 1% investment in technology, and I'm happy to see all of you guys are solution providers except for Kamal. Kamal, you're not a solution provider, and you are investing in technology. Can we know why you're investing in technology? Everybody's saying Europe and the US, and you're focusing, you said you have 40 years of experience in Dubai, and you are investing in technology. Can you explain why? What's the rationale behind that investment?
Look, we need to be at it's very important that as a company, we have a reputation of being transparent to start off with, of working in a team to deliver the project. And we want to be at the forefront of the industry. In order to be at the forefront of the industry, we have to invest in that technology. There's no other way about it. I've sat in meetings and I've told people, listen, enough is enough, we're going to do it now. And we've had to force it to happen. And it does happen. But as I said, it has to come right down through the chain of the company. It doesn't come one person, like, you do it and then that's it. It has to come down through the chain. It is very important. And it is very important for transparency. And I think, you know, we value, when we take a project on, we value the project more than we value ourselves. I mean, we've delivered projects where we've lost money, but we've had to deliver the project. Because at the end of the day, our reputation's on the line. And you don't get repeat business unless your reputation is good. So, you know, I think it's very important in being at the forefront of the industry, in investing in technology.
Okay. Sorry. Please.
I was about to say, if we look at the construction from a contractor point of view, What's the key challenge? It's always about cost control. We can build a reputation by paying for the building on behalf of the client, but we're losing money. So at the end, we need to get our profit. So we need to compare our budget, maintain it, preserve it, and compare it to the cost. We need to invest on technology so we can have the real-time access to information. We don't want to see we're losing money at the end of the project. We want to see it on a day-to-day basis so we can control it. This is where we have the risk analysis. This is where we mitigate any problem. And if we go back to the transparency, I just want to add that there's a problem, we see it in this part of the region, is contractors are afraid to, if you want to say, just put more information out there because of competition. So they think, oh, one employee is going to steal those information and give it to someone else, and that's a fact. But we're limiting ourselves, so we need to have more technology or access.
Thank you, Fady. David, please.
On that note, we'll finish the panel, and I'd like to thank our participants and please show their gratitude.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, just before you leave the stage, there's a group photo for you. And by this time, I would like to move in very quickly into our next presentation. We talked about data, we talked about technology, we talked about softwares. Let's learn a little bit more about how we're going to utilize technology to deliver value engineering. And on that note, I would probably ask Fady to stay on stage and deliver that presentation to us, if you don't mind, please. So we don't need really to welcome you again, can we? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Am I good to start? I want to thank my panelists that they spoke half of my presentation, so I'm going to sound like I'm going to repeat myself, which is good. It means I've done a good job researching about this topic. I know you're all tired. I know you want a coffee break. I know I want one. I'm just going to quickly take you through a small 10-minute presentation. I named it the Industry Revolution because this is what we've been talking about. And the things we're going to talk about just briefly about how technology evolved, what are the history and concept of value engineering, information sharing, data analysis, the discussion we've been having, what is the human interaction, and where and how we can benefit from this technology in order to have the best value engineering conduct. What happened in the recent years, I'm just going to take you a little bit back in time. I remember growing up in Lebanon. My uncle used to live in the United States, so the entire family used to write him letters. Remember these days, handwritten letters. We used to assemble them, wait for someone who's traveling to the States so he can deliver those messages to him. Sometimes we used to send him pictures. If you guys remember those old cameras, we have to take the entire film, wait for it to be developed, and then see what we have captured. It can go month and month until we have a reply back. And by that time, what we have sent them as information is outdated. At that time, we had no mobile phones, not even landlines, computers, satellite. They didn't exist like we have it today. This is how our TV used to look like, and we had no remote control. If we move fast forward, what happened? Everything changed so quick. Bye-bye Walkman, bye-bye cassettes. Modern day tools can fit thousands of songs and information in one device. If that is not enough, with a click of a button, we can stream online, watch movies, listen to any songs we want. Distant family members can communicate with each other, video calls, voice over IP calls, mobile calls. They can share moments of their life on the spot. Goodbye, old technology. Now, if there's something we don't know, we Google it. We have the search engine. We have the web. We can see. If I said something which you didn't understand, someone will pick up the phone and go and Google it. We are connected all the time. And this is how the transition happened very quick. What about value engineering? We often think of the following terminologies. We think about reliability, quality, reduced cost, customer satisfaction, etc., etc., etc. But how did it start? It was, as Suhail was mentioning, started during the World War II, where the lack of raw materials, labor, skilled laborers, and component parts led General Electric to search for other substitutes. They found that these substitutes are often reducing the cost and enhancing the performance. What started out as an accident of necessity turned out to be a systematic process. They called it value analysis at that time. The project management book of body of knowledge teach such technique as a mixer, optimization of a system and a mixed craft of performance and cost. The purpose of VE is to identify and remove unnecessary cost while maintaining and increasing the value for the customer. We often have multiple terminology for value engineering, like value analysis or value methodology. Define value engineering. It's an analytical process to identify what are the needed function of a product while minimizing the cost and increasing the value of that product. In other terms, go as scientific terms, value is equal the function, ratio of a function over a cost. So we can increase the value by either increasing the functionality or decreasing the cost. But we have to bear in mind that it's a primary intent of value engineering is to preserve and not to reduce the function in order to pursue a value improvement. How do we do value engineering? It's a workshop. It's about value. The workshop is conducted into phases, multiple phases, which it will start by first of all understanding what are the objectives of the owner. We need to understand and identify the current system functionality with relevant to the requirement. What does the system do and what must it do? It's not about having extra features, it's about having the minimum features while having the best cost and value. We can reach alternative less costly solution through going back to the history and all the knowledge we learned through life cycle of project, previous project, and see how we can maintain that performance with a less costly solution. The value engineering should coincide with the project start, as it has the best time for maximum benefit. However, during the project phase, it can have a significant contribution as long as those changes do not impact the due date, doesn't impact the schedule, or doesn't impose additional cost somewhere else while we're trying to do a saving on another part. When we look to a construction project, all these stakeholders are doing their day-to-day work by storing their information in the report somewhere. So we're talking about spreadsheets, emails, files, standalone application. We want to reach the best value engineering conduct. We want to have a collaboration. What we're missing, what we're having currently is paperwork processes, lack of proper coordination, information remains scattered among different departments and among different tools, softwares that we were talking about that only fit certain departments. We're looking to a risk sharing and mitigation. We're looking to weak supply chain management, missing data, time-consuming manual reports, and most of all, the integrity of information we are looking to is questioned. So bottom line, the construction industry has fallen behind the technology innovation. I was saying earlier that according to McKinsey in 2016, the construction industry is among the least digitized in the industry. It has less than 1% of revenue spent on technology. Yes, we are investing in some software, but we're not investing enough in technology. It's not about just one software, it's about the complete solution. Let's look at the industry transformation, and let's look to this amazing picture of how Dubai transformed from what used to be, what my parents used to tell me about Dubai 30 years ago, and how we are today. And the best is yet to come. The projects are becoming more complex in size and shape. We'll look to these concepts. We'll look to the frame which is completed and the skyscraper, rotating building. Traditional methodology of handling things have to change. In the design phase of the rotating skyscraper, which will be soon built in Dubai, designers during value engineering phase and through the latest technology has benefited from the gap between the buildings, between every floor, and they are going to install wind turbine which can provide green electricity to the entire building. This is how value engineering in collaboration with technology can lead us. We will have a rotating building where you can wake up and sleep at the same or different location view. Where does technology help with this transformation? According to a former CEO of HP, the goal is to turn data into information and information into insight. So this is what we were talking about earlier. We have a lot of data, but we don't have knowledge. So we need to have that transformation. In other words, we need to have a system-focused innovation to shift from standalone products into a complete integrated solution. If we analyze how technology has progressed over the years, handwritten letters all the way to WhatsApp, it is time for the construction industry to utilize the tools we have in hand in order to achieve the best value engineering practice. How? It is time for connected offices. It's time for online instant sharing of information and online document management system. We need to share the knowledge and learn from others. Why? Because this communication infrastructure allow the flow of complete information throughout the project lifecycle. We said it's a cycle. It starts at a point and it has to go back to the same point. That sharing of information will also feed the value engineering phases. We said it will start at the beginning of the project, but at the same time, it goes along the project. Companies should invest in and adopt and implement a full ERP system based on the online technology and databases. Value engineering is the basis of that methodology, and it integrates the Six Sigma tools, the statistical analysis of analyzing and minimizing the errors. Why? What's the added value? It will give an added value to value engineering process. It ensures that the right data are captured. Not only that, but it's in transparent, accountable format. It's not manual. And it will provide the value engineering team, the one who's going to do the workshop, with an enhanced platform. They're going to be able to evaluate, analyze, visualize, and report this data that will benefit. So we're going to use the history. We're going to use what's going on site in order to enhance what we're going to do. In addition, it will enable organizations to transform the data into knowledge, and it can be used with the current project, or it can be a learning curve for the next project. Digital collaboration should be used toward the seamless collection of real-time data into the component, starting from the design management, plan. So we need to integrate our design, our cost estimate into our plan, into the material management, crew, labors, quality control, contract management, performance management, and document management. If I'm going to approach what I've been saying, I will look to and I will think of an example, which is the BIM modeling. Building information modeling. BIM is a process spanning the generation and management of the physical and functional information of a project. So BIM concept is about compiling our project, all these 2D drawings, all this information into a 3D dimension. And also, we can add on top it a fourth dimension, which is our time, and a fifth dimension, which is our cost, and we can enhance more and more about operation and FM management. If we ask ourselves what technology has to offer to VE, and I think that is the purpose of this summit, we are looking, and the answer is innovation. Let's look to some of the examples of the tools we have today we can benefit in value engineering. Apps and handheld device. Paul was saying they are developing applications that can on-site help accessing those information and storing information. Now we have our mobiles, our tablets, barcode reading devices on site. Laser scanners. Augmented reality and virtual reality. Through VR and AR, we are able to see how parts fit into the project. We can virtually walk through the construction site even before we started the project. This will allow us to see how all the departments will fit: electrical, mechanical, civil. What are the problems we might face? What are the risks? We can see the problem before it happened if there was a problem in the design. GPS technology, 3D printers and usage of robotic construction. Projects have started now also to depend on off-site prefabrication of building components, and then they are later on installed on the building core shell on site. So we're using manufacturing as a process as well to fit into our project. Internet of Things, sensors and monitors, RFID tag, NFC tag, what Hiba was designing and was talking about, allow construction machinery, allow materials, structures, and labor to communicate to a central data platform, and we can capture critical performance parameters. Machine learning and drones, they are not just used for photography, but through the artificial intelligence, they can monitor the site progress and they can look after safety hazards. They can see what things are going that we are not being able to detect. At the end, what the question was mentioned in previous panels today, we need to look next year not about how we should do value engineering. We need to look what have we done to transform today to reach the value engineering methodology. What we need to do, we need to look to the current methodology in hand, reimagine and rewire what we're doing toward a transparent and risk-sharing mentality. We need to adopt a change management mindset. We don't look to the technology cost. We have to start looking at the return on investment. Yes, I'm going to pay this amount, but how much is going to return? How much is going to help me to do my work? Value engineering and technology will allow us to eliminate the wasted time that we're doing on manual work, on follow-up, and we can enhance it and benefit in designing new solutions. Manual data, which is why we need the technology. We need to transform it into automated reports. No longer have a question about the integrity of information because someone punched in a number, but it's an automated report coming from analysis and contribution of others through the connected project, and at the end, the predictive analysis mentality. And briefly, this is it. Thank you.
Any questions before we move into? Sorry, we have one there. Please, just here in the middle.
My name is Shubhashish Mukherjee from Dubai Airports Engineering Service. It is good to see that panelists are adding a lot of values to value engineering. I have a quick question. When you are doing the indexing or scoring of a value engineering process, when you are doing the indexing or scoring of a value engineering process, when it comes to comparing to value engineering service provider, there are 3 value engineering service provider is putting the values on my table and I want to compare them. So I have to set some parameters for comparison purpose. So how do I set the parameters and how do I factorize that? Suppose reliability, sustainability, payback, risk management. So what are the major parameters I set and what is the weightage I have to put when I have to compare the number of value engineering service providers? The question is clear, or should I to elaborate on that?
Can you
elaborate? No, in summary, Fady, gentleman was talking about the parameters for scoring the competition in one way or another. So if he's there to make a decision, he would love to know, what am I comparing to? What is the benchmark? How is the scoring parameters and the criteria, and how does it work?
Well, we cannot generalize one parameter that can fit to all. Again, as I said earlier, construction industry is the most complicated among all. So what we need to score first, we need to ask ourselves, what are we looking at? Not what we're doing. What is the added value? What is the value we're looking for? So when I want to have a parameter for comparison, I need to look to what does this system do? The minimum, and compare, not the benefit. I don't know if that's clear. So we're looking to the basic performance, not the enhanced performance. So it's a minimum cost, basic performance as an index to start the comparison. And then we can look to the extra feature and what extra cost. Is that clear?
Thank you, Fady. Any last question? All right. Well, Fady, thank you so much for an excellent presentation. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. And just before we move into our last session, which I believe is very exciting, can I just have one more reminder? There is a feedback form at the back of the notes in front of your tables. If you can please fill it out before you leave today, that will be fantastic. I was told that you're not allowed to have lunch unless you have filled that form, so just keep that in mind. Anyways, so moving to our last CPD presentation that will be delivered by CIOB and Mr. Nicky Doberanu. Please join us to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I know everybody's hungry, so I'll try to be very quick. I'll answer a question through my presentation. I'll answer the last question that was asked earlier. The intent of the job plan is to come up with an objective response to a lot of subjective matters. And V is very subjective because if I say, buy me a smartphone, if I ask 3 people, I'll get at least 4 answers because everybody values something more, maybe the tradition of that company in delivering mobile phones and so on. So moving on, I'll just give a little bit of background about myself. I'm an engineer, but I work as a QS. I'm also a QS. I'm in love with technology, but I'm not going to talk about technology now. I work for a division of KO called Sequest, who looks only after contracts and quantity surveying. And I'm a member of the CIOB Business Development Board in the UK and a local member of the CIOB Dubai Hub. This presentation is offered to you by the CIOB. There's a number of current projects that I look after together with my team. They vary, but we're also covering life cycle costings, which are important when we talk about VE because, as it was covered by previous panelists, it's not only the capital expenditure, it's also the operational expenditure, and sometimes maybe the return or the profit you get through operating an asset, maybe a hotel or any similar asset that brings some money back. The father of value engineering or value analysis is Larry Miles. He used to work, I think Fady touched upon this, he used to work for General Electric in the UK. He moved from design engineering to purchasing and then to procurement. And he was very optimistic. He had a good reputation of great enthusiasm in providing value engineering or value analysis at the time. And it was a time of war, early 40s in the US. He was trying to find products, services, and resources in a time of war, but based on their functions. As long as they met the basic functions, then the products were good. Sometimes he even got them cheaper. And that was called value analysis. But then in the mid-60s, 3 government organizations in the UK, most of them revolving around engineering, took over the procedure, and they said, because most of their staff were engineers, they said, let's call it value engineering. So it got worldwide acceptance, and in '59, an organization dedicated to the practice of the V and the certification of competent V practitioners was formed, and this is SAVE that I'm a member of, and I know there's quite a lot of members in the GCC of the Society of American Value Engineers. My talk is based on input from them, so it's going to be focused on the way they look at value engineering. Now, this is the basic definition of value, but what I was telling you earlier, value is the way a customer looks at requirements, but it's always measured by the willingness to pay for it. And it's always the perception rather than the intrinsic value. Again, it's a smartphone, it can be any brand, it can be any price. So it depends more on the perception of the worth. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to come up with a scoring process which will facilitate a decision on which alternative, if there is an alternative that is more appropriate for a project. We talked about costs, but they are a major, but not an overriding criteria in the pursuit of value. If you get more function at the same cost, you still did a good value engineering exercise. So at the same time, we're not trying to reduce on the function, we maintain the client's expectations. This is a sample V job plan. Someone touched upon a proper V session taking weeks or even a month. This is a sample job plan, which is part of our V manual, and it takes place over a calendar month, and it includes about 21 days of work. We'll go through each of the stages. There's 3 main stages. First one is information stage, where you gather information about the requirements from the client, the current state of design, and the estimate of the costs. Then we have the creation stage, which is where all the brainstorming takes place, and we design the proposals. Then we've got analysis and development of those proposals, and the last stage is the report stage. Usually in such a process, we have a V facilitator, which may be a member of SAVE, or it may be a QS, maybe a PM, anyone that has a structured approach. Their input is just to facilitate the value engineering process. They wouldn't have input necessarily on whatever is chosen as a good V option. This plan includes a number of formal and informal workshops, development workshops, client presentations, and also a delivery session in the end. Information stage is coming in 3 parts, and in the first part we gather all the facts and review the design and the cost estimate. So we know where we are, we know what V to go for. In the second phase, apologies, we have the first workshop out of 4, and we've got the facilitator together with the project manager and the client's representatives. And what's important to know about the client's representatives, we're not only talking about people who are experts in construction, we're also focusing on if it's an asset that will be operated by a client, we would like to have his asset managers or facilities managers in there, because again, operational expenditure is a big, it's an important aspect. In the part 3, we have a VE presentation to the client to make sure we've understood the requirements, and we review the objectives and the components. It's important that the participants have a detailed understanding of the project. I've been in a number of sessions where people were brought in and they didn't know the project. So we're losing time with having people who are not up to speed with the project. Ideally, everybody should be up to speed. We're focused a bit more on workshop 1, which was split into 3 parts. The element identification, which is the first one, and this is for designs which have the highest potential to return optimum value. The project criteria, which usually are given by the client, maybe in an RFP or in a design brief, are discussed here. Again, this list is not fixed, but there are some sample project criteria. The first one refers to the stakeholder or the client's approval. We can't implement anything in the design if we don't get the approval from the client. Maybe time is of the essence. We're talking about Expo 2020. We had FIFA 2018 earlier. There's certain projects which can't be delivered after that time. So how does V impact on the time and on the delivery? Cost, again, we have a number of costs. We can start with the cost of land, legal fees, professional fees for the design team, and so on. We've got the capital expenditure to build the asset. We've got operational as well, and potential income from operating the asset. We're looking also at effective construction in terms of buildability, where we would need input from an experienced contractor maybe, and design functionality to make sure that the product we're delivering is fit for purpose. We're also talking about enhancing sustainability, and by sustainability, I don't only mean Estidama, Al-Safat, BREEAM, or LEED. We're talking about social sustainability, economic sustainability, and also environmental. In terms of health and safety, we need to make sure that whatever V solutions and opportunities will be put forward don't bring additional risk, and they're all in line with the statutes in the country. The paired comparison analysis, this is where we do, I think someone asked earlier, how do we rate the importance of different aspects that the client is focused on a project. And this is how we score the preference, and we rate them against each other. For example, if we look at the first line and we take the cost compared to the time, This is where they meet on horizontal and vertical. The cost is more important, but the scoring for it is one, which is marginally more important if you look at the legend on the top. Then we have one where the cost is more important in terms of enhancing sustainability, and this is more important. If we have number 3, that means significantly more important. What we get after adding all these scores on horizontal and vertical, so the criteria score is the sum of all these scores. And this shows how important each aspect is for the client. The creation stage, this is, again, one part. We've got workshop 2, where we have the facilitator, the design team, usually the design team heads or the section heads, MEP, structures, landscaping, MEP, which is a very important one. We do short technical presentations. These guys would do, the design heads would do presentations. And we also talk about the ability of design development to address function, maybe to improve it, to enhance it. We seek opportunities from all participants in a scoring sheet. And once we believe all these opportunities are exhausted, we divide the participants into groups, like we had earlier, the panels. We have someone like a moderator, which would be the leader of that group. And we ask them to go to either a separate room or to create teams where they discuss each of these opportunities. And they're discussed in terms of positive and negative attributes of each of them. V, in general, is a comparison of an existing design with an alternative, with another one. The Group V opportunity scoring, this is the sheet. Again, we have scores from 0 to 10 now, and this is to determine the feasibility of the VE. These teams that we have about 4 to 6 people, they discuss and cost just a first cost, something rough. It can be in a local currency or it can be as a percentage, saying that this VE option is 10% cheaper than the existing design. The scores, again, 5 is the neutral score, which is the one for that doesn't show any impact compared to the current state of design. And then 6 to 10 is there's an anticipated degree of improvement. 1 to 4, it's the V is lower than the existing in terms of function, and 0 refers to descoping or cost cutting. We also list at the bottom of this spreadsheet all the pros and cons. Then the group feedback. Once we finish the exercise, we regroup the meeting, and each of the group will offer feedback to the assembled meeting. Each of the approved V opportunities becomes a V proposal. Now we're moving into the third stage, which is analysis and development. This again has 3 parts. In the first one, we finalize the scoring and cost review, the facilitator with a QS. We review the first costs. We rate the V proposals according to their relative scores. In the second part, we have development workshops with the design team and with the QS. We take feedback from the design team and coordinate the submissions. We obtain information on remaining alternatives, and this is usually informed by lifecycle costings analysis that we would do to make sure that an option is good not only for bringing the cost down and thinking we improve the value without looking at the whole life cycle. And in the workshop 3, we have the facilitator, the project manager, and the design team. Now, focusing on this workshop 3, what happens in here is we have the returns from workshops 1 and 2, and we couple them together in something called the results matrix. And this is where we combine the preference between, say, time, cost, stakeholder approval, with the other scores we gave to each opportunity. Current design is 50%. Whatever is higher than 50 brings additional value in the opinion of the team. Again, it's a subjective team effort. Whatever is under 50, it brings no additional value. There's a number of activities under this workshop. I won't cover them, but what I want to cover here is we're doing an option review, and the way we put them for clients' consideration is scoring them from the highest to the lowest. And unless a the client or the stakeholder approves on these VE proposals, they will not go further. We need to show them the scoring and also the cost, and if we recommend that as a team or not. This is the de-scoping I spoke earlier. In some circumstances, there's a number of VE opportunities that don't get moved into VE proposals because they're not meeting the benchmark. They're not meeting the project requirements or stakeholders' criteria. So we would still review them and with a client, and maybe he will change his expectations based on these. Some of them may be important, and he can say, I can live with that, implement this, even if it's a de-scoping. So not a proper VE. At the report stage, this is when we meet the client again. We're presenting a draft of the VE report to the client, and we get comments. Usual VE reports, as usual reports, we will have executive summary, introduction. We will also have goals and objectives, the VE methodology and approach, analysis and recommendations. In the second part, we submit the final VE report, and this confirms the inclusion of all the comments from the part one above. Always the implementation of VE proposals is subject to the client's approval, and putting those VE proposals into the design is managed by the design section heads. Now, this is the end of my presentation. Provided that you've done a good work in the VE, you'll get a well done from the client. I just want to thank, before I go, I want to thank the team at CPI, Sheena, Jason, and David for a very good event. And on behalf of the CIOB, I'd like to thank you for attending my session. I have a number of sessions coming up in the future, so if you want to join me, feel free to register for them. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Nicky.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. We're reaching basically the end of our conference today. And again, I send a thank to CPI and all the team for actually putting this together. And thanks to you for taking the time to be part of this amazing, I would say, knowledge exchange and sharing between all of us. Lunch is being served, so thank you very much. And please remember to fill the form before you leave today at the back of the notebook. Thank you so much, and hope to see you in the very near future. Thank you. Thank you.